Chapter 1549. Hearing this, City Lord Duan's despairing heart was reignited with hope. He hurriedly asked, "What do you need? Please tell me, young Master Feng." His father was like a big tree in the Duan clan. He definitely could not let him fall. Fengjiu glanced at him and said unhurriedly, 1,000-year chilling ice bed, 9 tendrils purple spiritual grass, and 2 9th-level ice spirit cores. Hearing these 3 things, City Lord Duan frowned. These 3 things, there is only 1 9th-level ice spirit core in my City Lord's manor. I don't have the other 2. However, young Master Feng, don't worry. One of the clans in the city has a 1,000-year chilling ice bed. As for the 9 tendrils purple spiritual grass, I will find it as soon as possible. 3 days, prepare these things in 3 days. Fengjiu stood up and said, although he still has 7 days to live, the latest is 3 days later. Okay, I will get someone to do it immediately. I will also personally go to the clans in the city. Young Master Feng, I will get someone to bring you to rest first. He gestured to Fengjiu. Get someone to bring my horse to the inn, she said as she walked out. No problem. After City Lord Duan arranged for someone to receive Fengjiu, he hurriedly left and headed to one of the large clans in the city. That clan practiced the ice soul cultivation method. A few years ago, they obtained the 1,000-year chilling ice bed from a black market auction. The 1,000-year chilling ice bed, which was useless to others, became the best aid for their clan's cultivation. It was just unknown if they could borrow the 1,000-year chilling ice bed from their clan. On the other side, Fengjiu, who was strolling around the Duan clan, came to the garden pavilion and sat down. A servant brewed a pot of tea and waited on him. Since there was nothing to do, he looked at the servant girl beside him and asked, "Who is Duanmu Bai in your manor?" Hearing the red-clothed young master ask about something that the entire city knew, the servant girl was stunned and hurriedly said, "He is our city lord's younger brother, our manor's second master." Fengjiu raised his eyebrows. He doesn't come back often. He rarely comes back. I heard from the other people in the mansion that the second master has been cultivating in the Dan Yang sect since he was young. He is now a disciple of the 3 Yang Peak Master. Then your second master isn't married? She propped up her chin with one hand and asked curiously. The maid lowered her head and took a step back. She said, "Young master, I can't say anything else. Talking behind my master's back is disrespectful. Please don't make things difficult for me." Fengjiu smirked. "All right, I won't ask any more. There's tea here but no pastries. Go get some." "Yes." The maidservant responded and left. While Fengjiu was drinking tea, admiring flowers, and eating pastries in the City Lord Manor, the entire city was alarmed. When the various powers heard that 2 young masters with 2 sacred expert emblems arrived in the city, they all found this hard to believe. Is that true? It's really the alchemy's sacred expert and alchemy's sacred expert emblems? A family's patriarch couldn't hide his shock as he asked the people below. It's true. The news has spread throughout the city. That person wore the emblems in front of all the alchemists and healers outside the City Lord Manor. They all saw it clearly. Is that person still in the city? The family patriarch on the main seat asked. Yes, he is still in the City Lord Manor. When he heard what was said, he stood up and thought inwardly, regardless of whether it is alchemy or pill refinement, those who can reach the level of sacred master are definitely not ordinary people. Even in this city, it is absolutely impossible to find someone who possesses both of these emblems. If I can become friends with this kind of person. Chapter 1550. Hearing this, the family head was a little surprised. City Lord. Why is he here? Quickly lead the way. As he spoke, he stepped outside to welcome the guest. Ha, City Lord Duan, how did you find the time to come here? Please come in, please come in. The family head cupped his hands and smiled, inviting City Lord Duan to the main hall. Brother Meng, how have you been? I came in a hurry today and really disturbed you. Please forgive me. City Lord Duan smiled and cupped his hands as he followed family head Meng inside. After entering and landing, family head Meng asked, I heard that a young master wearing the 2 saint badges came to the city lord's mansion this morning. At this moment, why isn't the city lord receiving guests at home, but running over to my place? Is there something you need? City Lord Duan said directly, I won't hide it from Brother Meng. I came here today to ask for a favor. Oh. What is it? He was a little confused. What kind of favor would make him come here to ask for a favor? It's like this. City Lord Duan told him simply that he needed the 1,000-year chilling ice bed to treat his father's illness. He hoped that City Lord Duan could lend him the 1,000-year chilling ice bed. After hearing this, family head Meng smiled, so it's about this. He nodded, indicating that he understood, and said, City Lord, I've placed this ice bed in the ice cellar, what do you think of this? When the time comes for the treatment, please invite the old man over. Don't worry, I'll tell them not to disturb the old man's treatment. Alright, then I'll have to trouble Brother Meng. I'm in a hurry to collect the other 2 things, so I'll take my leave first. Family head Duan stood up and cupped his hands. I'll see you out. He personally saw him out. After he left, he thought to himself. The city lord's father's illness had been treated by many people, but none of them could cure him. Now, this person could diagnose him and treat him. It seemed that he really had some ability. That's right, if he didn't have any ability, how could he have 2 saint badges? On this day, the city lord ran around, hoping to collect the things he needed within 3 days. In the city lord's mansion, Fengzhou, who everyone was curious about, wandered around for a day before arriving at a garden in a courtyard. It was said that the exquisite rainbow flower was planted in this garden. However, when she approached the courtyard, she saw that there was a formation set up inside. With some curiosity, she probed the formation and walked in. After walking around for a while, she passed through the array and arrived at the inner area. As soon as she entered, she saw a small garden with all kinds of spiritual flowers and plants. It was surrounded by a wooden fence, and every stalk of spiritual medicine was extremely rare and precious, which surprised her. He didn't expect the Duan clan to have so many spirit flowers. However, why was there no one guarding such a place? She glanced around and saw no one around. Then, she slowly walked in. Her gaze swept across the spiritual flowers and finally fell on a spiritual flower that was placed in the middle. This is the exquisite rainbow flower. Not only can it be used as medicine, this flower is also extremely beautiful. She softly muttered and stopped to look at the exquisite rainbow flower. She looked at the 7 colors flowing on each petal. The flower was as beautiful as a rainbow, and she couldn't take her eyes off it. Chapter 1551. It was the corner of a plain white robe that was hidden among the flowers. She was a little surprised. She didn't feel anyone here. Moreover, even when she saw the corner of a robe, she didn't feel the slightest fluctuation of aura. So this person was just an ordinary person who didn't cultivate. She slowly walked forward and saw that it was a woman. However, she seemed to have fainted there. What surprised her the most was the woman's face. It's her. She was a little confused. Wasn't this the woman she had saved on the road? Why was she here? However, upon closer inspection, she felt that something wasn't quite right. Miss? Miss? She called out twice and went forward to help the woman in. She casually checked her pulse and couldn't help but be slightly startled. She lowered her head slightly and looked at the woman that she had helped up. So it's not the same person. No wonder it felt so strange. There was something different. Then, are they twins? She softly muttered as her gaze fell on the woman's face. She was a woman with an outstanding appearance. She wasn't the type of beauty or absolute beauty, but rather the type of delicate beauty. Although they had the same appearance, their temperaments were very different. Even though the woman was unconscious, her entire body exuded a tranquil aura. The aura on her body was extremely quiet. It was because of this that she didn't notice that there was someone here when she came in. Glancing at the spirit flower in front of the woman, she first helped the woman out of the garden. When she came to the pavilion outside, she saw that there was still paper and a charcoal pen on the table. On the paper was an unfinished painting. She took out a small bottle from her space and unscrewed the cap. She brought it to the woman's nose. Not long after, the woman slowly woke up. Fengjiu put away the bottle and picked up the charcoal pen to write on a piece of white paper. You're awake. You fainted just now because you smelled too much of the purple dado flower's fragrance. You can't smell the purple dado flower for too long. Be careful in the future. The woman blinked her eyes and stared at the red-clothed Fengjiu in a daze. Her face was filled with curiosity and surprise. She looked at Fengjiu and then at the paper that Fengjiu brought over. After reading the words on it, the woman revealed a sweet smile. She nodded at Fengjiu, took the paper and pen, and wrote 2 sentences on it. Thank you, you're really pretty. Reading the words, Fengjiu laughed and wrote on the paper, a few days ago, I saw a girl who looked exactly like you. Are you twins? A smile blossomed on the woman's face as she wrote on the paper, she is my little sister. Thus, Fengjiu followed the woman to the pavilion beside the small garden and chatted with her using pen and paper. Because, from the examination of her pulse, he found out that this woman could neither speak nor hear. When the sky darkened, the people in the city lord's manor turned the entire manor upside down, but they still couldn't find Fengjiu. They thought that the red-clothed youth had left and hurriedly reported it to the city lord. After running around for a day, the city lord returned home. When he heard that the red-clothed youth was gone, he couldn't help but be startled. He slightly frowned and asked, did he ride his horse away? Did someone see him go out? Chapter 1552. The city lord frowned. After a moment of thought, he said, he should still be in the manor. Where have you guys not searched? Go look for him again. Only the eldest young Miss Full Moon courtyard is left. However, there is a formation outside the eldest young Miss courtyard. That young master shouldn't have been able to enter. As the housekeeper spoke, he saw the family lord sweep his gaze over with a dark expression. What do you mean by shouldn't have been? Are you treating him as an ordinary person? Can an ordinary person have 2 sacred expert emblems? As soon as his shout fell, he walked inside with large strides while instructing, have the manor's people stop randomly searching. He should be with Ying. I'll just go take a look. Seeing this, the housekeeper hurriedly instructed the manor's people to stop searching. Then, he quickly headed towards Full Moon Courtyard. No one would go to the eldest young Miss Courtyard, so why did this red-clothed young master run there? It really made them look for him. At this time, Fengjiu's mood was just right. Apart from having an extremely pleasant conversation with this woman called Duan Ying, what surprised her the most was that even though she couldn't hear or speak, her culinary skills were unexpectedly good. Because it was getting late, in order to thank her, she brought her to the kitchen to make a meal for her. After walking around the courtyard, she found out that there was only Ying in this large courtyard. The city lord's manor was so large, and there were so many servants, yet there wasn't a single person to serve her. One had to understand that she was the eldest young miss of the city lord's manor. She sat at the stone table outside the kitchen, looking at the dishes piled high in her own bowl. She smiled and helped her pick up some food with her chopsticks. Then, she indicated for her to hurry and eat. However, she saw her look at her with a face full of joy. She put down her chopsticks and picked up a charcoal pen to write on a piece of paper. "I'm very happy today. There's finally someone to eat with me." When she heard these words, her heart ached. Looking at her pure and innocent smile, she felt a bit upset. The city lord clearly had 2 daughters, but the outside world only knew of one. Meanwhile, this one lived in this courtyard in obscurity, never taking half a step out of the manor, never hearing the beautiful sounds of nature in this world, never saying a single word. 2 people, with the same appearance, had completely different fates. Young Master Feng. City Lord Duan's voice rang out at this moment. She turned around to look at the person who had come, only to see him walk forward in surprise. Looking at the simple yet exquisite dishes on the table, he asked in astonishment, "Why is young Master Feng here? Was he here to see the exquisite rainbow flower?" How did he know that the exquisite rainbow flower was planted in this courtyard? "I accidentally entered the courtyard and met Miss Duan. I happened to be hungry, so Miss Duan invited me to a meal. City Lord, do you want to join us?" She smiled faintly as she looked at City Lord Duan, who was standing to the side. Hearing this, he looked at his daughter who stood up from the table and smiled. He raised his hand and gestured, "Sit, don't just stand there." He then asked the housekeeper behind him to bring another set of chopsticks and bowls. He then sat down and said, "I just came back from outside. Since young Master Feng is eating here, I naturally have to accompany him. However, these dishes are a bit too simple. How about this? I'll get someone to prepare a few more dishes and send them over. Don't worry about it, this is enough." Feng Jiu smiled at Duan Yingying, who couldn't hide her joy. Chapter 1553. Feng Jiu shook his head. "No, I think this is good. This courtyard is quiet, and with such an understanding Miss Duan accompanying me, it's not boring. It's good that young Master Feng likes this place. Come, young Master Feng, please eat. After dinner, I'll take you to see the exquisite rainbow flower. That spirit herb is planted in this courtyard and will be taken care of by my daughter." "Okay." Feng Jiu's eyes flashed. After glancing at him, he picked up his chopsticks and began to eat. After chatting for a while, the 3 of them walked to the small garden after dinner. Although the sky was already dark, the exquisite 7-colored flower in the garden was still emitting a faint halo, appearing extremely beautiful in the night. "Young Master Feng, I visited a few families outside today. Now I have the 1,000-year chilling ice bed and the 2 9th-grade ice crystal cores. As for the other spirit herb, I found the local black market and they said they will deliver it to me in 2 days. Within 3 days, it should all be here." Speaking of this, City Lord Duan could not hide his joy. Finally, those 3 things were settled. This allowed him to put down the huge rock in his heart. Now, all that was left was for him to treat her. After speaking, he paused for a moment, glanced at his daughter, and said to Feng Jiu, "Young Master Feng, may I ask you to stay in this courtyard for the next 2 days? This courtyard is quite big, and there are many rooms here." Hearing this, Feng Jiu glanced at him with a faint smile. "City Lord Duan is quite assured of me. Young Master Feng is an honored guest. I thought that since young Master Feng and my daughter hit it off at first sight, my daughter can accompany you for the next 2 days. Moreover, the exquisite rainbow flower is in this courtyard. I think it may be more suitable for young Master Feng to stay here." She smiled and glanced back at Duan Yingying. "Since that's the case, then I'll stay in this courtyard. With fresh flowers and beauties as my companions, it's indeed pleasing to the eye." As a result, Fengjiu stayed in this courtyard. Duan Yingying, who was in the same courtyard, did not have the slightest awareness of the inconvenience of a man and a woman living in the same courtyard. In her opinion, it was fine as long as the two of them did not live in the same room. She did not care about reputation like those so-called noble young ladies outside. At this moment, Fengjiu didn't know that she was about to meet someone she hadn't seen in a long time. The next morning a bearded and stocky man wearing a black robe walked in from outside the city gate. Because of his slovenly appearance, he looked like a man in his 30s or 40s, which was a little scary. He held a long broadsword with a round handle in his hand. As he walked, he looked majestic and murderous, causing the people on the street to involuntarily avoid him and open up a path for him. After seeing the stocky man in black robes, some cultivators secretly sized him up and whispered, "This person's murderous aura is so heavy. I can tell that he's not someone to be trifled with just by looking at him. His aura is restrained. What's emitting from his body is not the aura of spiritual energy, but the aura of profound energy. Moreover, it's the aura of a peak martial saint." Who is this person? With the strength of a peak martial saint, he's definitely a strong person. That's right. This kind of profound energy cultivation is already comparable to the peak masters of the Black Tortoise sect. Chapter 1554. Waiter, a pot of wine, a few meat dishes, and rice. After entering the restaurant, he found a place on the first floor by the window and sat down. He then shouted with a voice like thunder, revealing a sense of refreshment. "Okay, sir, drink your wine first, the food will be served soon." The waiter served a pot of wine and left. Not long after, he brought a few meat dishes and rice. "Sir, if it's not enough, you can call this little one." After saying that, he left. The people in the restaurant looked at the black-clothed man after he came in. When they saw him sitting by the window eating meat, they didn't pay him any more attention. Instead, they talked about the things that happened in the city in the past 2 days. It's true. Many people saw it. It was really a young man. A moment ago, the alchemist said that the young man was not qualified to appear in front of the city lord's mansion. The next moment, the young man took out 2 badges and put them on his chest, making the alchemist unable to say a word. It was really a slap in the face. That was 2 holy master badges. Not to mention our city, no one in other cities has the ability to get 2 holy master badges. So awesome. What kind of young man is he? Could he be some old monster? Another person asked curiously while eating peanuts. Old monster. Impossible, impossible, that's clearly a handsome young man wearing an extremely dazzling red robe. His entire person is like a demon, unbelievably good-looking. A man at another table said with a smile, "Not bad, not bad, I know that red-clothed young man. When I was drinking with a friend that day, I saw him riding a strange horse into the city. At that time, I saw that the young man's appearance was extremely outstanding and he was riding a strange horse, so I took a second look." When the man eating by the window heard this, he was stunned for a moment. He turned his head to look at the man who spoke and asked, "Brother, is that red-clothed young man riding a strange white horse with horns on its head?" Not bad, it's a strange white horse with horns on its head." "Brother, have you seen it before?" the man asked in surprise. The black-clothed man's face revealed a smile, but it was covered by his beard, so it wasn't too clear. He didn't answer, but asked, "You said that this person was in front of the city lord's mansion. Could it be that he had gone to the city lord's mansion? Is he still in the city or has he left?" "In the city lord's mansion." Because the old city lord was so ill that all the doctors were helpless, that red-robed young master came out of nowhere and was invited into the city lord's mansion yesterday. He should still be in the city lord's mansion now. Thank you for telling me. He stood up and clasped his fist. He took out 2 gold coins and placed them on the table. He called for the waiter to collect the money and then walked out with his broadsword. Seeing the black-robed man's figure moving like the wind, the few people couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. They thought to themselves, who is this person? Why was his aura so frightening? In front of the city lord's mansion, a burly man dressed in black stood there with a long saber in his hand like a door god. He raised his head and glanced at the words City Lord's Mansion. No one knew what he was thinking, but there was a smile and joy in his eyes. However, the 2 guards in front of the door involuntarily swallowed their saliva in the face of this burly man who had suddenly appeared in front of the city governor's mansion and was holding a large blade in his hand. They stared at him vigilantly. Chapter 1555. I'm looking for someone. He glanced at the 2 guards and said, Go in and report that I'm the elder brother of the red-robed young master. Hearing this, the 2 guards looked at each other, and one of them quickly went in. The elder brother of the red-robed young master? After hearing this, Mayor Duan asked someone to invite the person outside in. When he saw the burly man in black with a biting cold aura, his eyes narrowed. When he saw this man, he smelled a strong smell of blood. When he looked again, he only felt that this man had a biting cold aura. His steps were steady, and his figure was tall and straight like a pine tree. However, there was a murderous aura around him, and he gave people the feeling that he was not to be trifled with. He stared at this man with suspicion in his heart. That Master Feng was tall and slender, and he had the noble aura of an elegant young master. His red robe was flamboyant and unrestrained, and he was enchanting and eye-catching, making him unforgettable. The man in front of him was dressed in black, and he had the back of a tiger and the waist of a bear. He was majestic and ferocious, and his face was untrimmed. His muscles were well developed, and he was full of explosive power. His steps were steady, and his aura was restrained, but he gave people the feeling that he had an extremely strong combat ability. No matter how you looked at it, this man did not resemble the enchanting Master Feng at all. How could these 2 people be brothers? How should I address you? Mayor Duan, who was sitting in the main seat, asked after sizing him up. My name is Guan Shilin. He sat down and put his broadsword aside. He took a sip of the tea that the servant had brought him to moisten his throat, and then asked, Mayor Duan, where is my brother now? Mayor Duan heard this, and his eyes moved slightly. He asked, You said that your surname is Guan. Hearing this, Guan Shilin knew that he had misunderstood, so he laughed loudly and said, He and I are sworn brothers, so of course we have different surnames. Mayor Duan, you don't have to worry, I won't randomly acknowledge this brother. Oh. Then what is your brother's surname? He asked again. Seeing this, Guan Shilin glanced at him and smiled meaningfully. Her surname is Feng, and some people call her the Ghost Doctor. If you don't believe me, you can ask her to meet me, and she will know that I am not lying. Hearing this, City Master Duan was 70% convinced. His attitude immediately became friendly. I see. Forgive my rudeness. Brother Guan, this way please. I'll take you to see young Master Feng. Thank you for your trouble. Guan Shilin raised his broadsword and cupped his fists in a salute, then walked out beside him. Master. The butler called out. He stepped forward and whispered a few words, but no one knew what he was talking about. After listening to the housekeeper's words, Master Duan said apologetically to Guan Shilin, Brother Guan, I have some matters to attend to. I'll get the butler to take you there. Sure, Mayor Duan, go ahead. Guan Shilin said. It didn't matter who led the way, as long as he could see Xiao Zhou. Thus, the butler took Guan Shilin to the courtyard. When they reached the courtyard, the butler was about to speak when Guan Shilin said, This is the courtyard? All right then. I'll go in by myself. You can go back. The butler was stunned for a moment, then hurriedly said, Master Guan, is there a formation inside, or? He was interrupted before he could finish. Formation. It's fine, I'm just going to try it out. Go ahead. Don't disturb us brothers from catching up. Guan Shilin waved his hand and walked in. Chapter 1556. He had traveled extensively with the mercenaries from the black market for so long that he had done some research on formations. He did not think that he would be stumped by a formation. He wanted to try to walk in, and he thought that it should be a formation set up by Feng Zhou, but he didn't think that it was set up by the Duan family. After entering the formation, he walked in a few circles, but in the end, he still walked in. As soon as he entered, he saw a small garden. A petite woman wearing a plain dress was watering the plants in the garden with her back facing him. He thought that she was Feng Zhou's servant girl, so he called out to her. Hey, girl over there, come over here. Who knew that when his rough voice came out, the person on the other side didn't even have the slightest bit of reaction and was still watering there. Hence, he walked over and shouted again, Little girl, I'm talking to you. There was still no response, so he walked into the garden and patted her shoulder from behind. Hey! Duan Yingying, who was watering the spiritual herbs in the garden, was suddenly patted on the shoulder. She thought that it was Feng Zhou, but when she turned around to look, she was so frightened that her shoulders shrank back and the watering pot in her hand fell to the ground. Looking at the tall and burly man with a frightening beard in front of her, her face turned pale and her body went limp and fell to the ground. What's going on? Do I look that scary? Guan Shilin frowned and reached out to catch the person who had fainted. He carried her to the pavilion. Just as he was about to find someone to take the little girl away, he heard footsteps coming in his direction. He turned around and saw a red figure leaping into his sight. Little Nine. He shouted in pleasant surprise, waving at the person who had come. Hearing the voice, Feng Zhou was stunned. When his gaze fell on the person in the pavilion, his eyes filled with surprise and he could not help but smile. Brother. Why are you here? She quickly ran forward and arrived at the pavilion, only to see Duan Yingying unconscious. She couldn't help but point at her and ask, what happened to her? Little Nine, I really didn't expect you to be here. When I was eating in a restaurant in the city, I heard the people outside talking about you. When I heard those people's descriptions, I knew it was you. He patted her shoulder with his large hand. Other than becoming stronger, you haven't changed much. Oh, that's right, this little girl fainted because of me. Fainted because of you. Feng Zhou was stunned, but when his eyes fell on his bearded face, he couldn't help laughing. Brother, look at you, at least fix your beard. Fortunately, it's daytime. If it's night, it's even scarier. Didn't I have no time to trim my beard when I was out on a mission? Besides, I'm used to it. All the men I hang out with are men. Which one of them isn't like this? He stroked the beard on his face and said, I don't look that scary, but I actually scared a little girl until she fainted. She's not a little girl. She's the mayor's eldest daughter, Duan Yingying. Feng Zhou said with a smile. Oh. She's the mayor's daughter. I thought she was one of your servants. When I came in and asked her where you were, she didn't even respond. Not only is she timid, she also has a bad temper. Chapter 1557. She's deaf and mute. Guan Shilin was surprised and looked at the girl lying on the stone table with her eyes closed. If Xiao Jiu had not mentioned it, he would not have been able to tell. Moreover, this girl was quite pretty. Yes, she's the eldest daughter of the Duan residents, Duan Yingying. She also has a twin sister named Duan Linlin. Although the two sisters look the same, their lives are different. She has lived here alone since she was young, and this courtyard is hers. I just took the opportunity to move in. Hearing this, Guan Shilin nodded. He looked at the girl and expressed sympathy in his heart, but he did not say anything. Instead, he looked away from the girl and gestured for Fengzhou to sit down. Xiaozhou, sit down. Let's have a good chat. Why did you come to Duan City? I heard from the people outside that you're here to treat City Lord Duan's illness. Is there something you need? Brother, you really know me well. She smiled and said, we haven't seen each other for a long time. You don't know how many things have happened in the past 2 years. Let me tell you, that year when I left the academy. The siblings had not seen each other for a long time, so Fengzhou roughly told him what had happened. In the end, after hearing Fengzhou's story, Guan Shilin nodded in realization. So that's how it is. No wonder I met you here. So you came here because of the exquisite rainbow flower. However, even though you've experienced a lot in these 2 years, you've finally found your mother. She's still alive, isn't she? She sighed softly and said, yes. Nothing else is important. As long as my mother is still alive, I believe that everything will pass. Oh right, didn't you say that you found some clues about your father? Did you find anything after that? She asked. Guan Shilin shook his head and said, no, it's as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack. He paused and looked at her and said, Xiaozhou, sometimes I can't help but wonder if my father didn't want to come back. Otherwise, why hasn't he come back for so many years? Brother, don't give up. You must have faith in your heart. Whether he comes back or not, didn't you say that you must find him? That's right. I once said that I must find him. I must find him. He said firmly and then laughed. All right, let's not talk about this. Xiaozhou, does that mean you found my adoptive mother? So when are you going back? I'll go back with you. The 7 colors exquisite flower is here, but I still have to go to Sky Mountain to find another spiritual medicine. Once I find all of these spiritual medicines and get rid of the poison in my mother's body, I will go back. I think my father will be very happy to see us all go back together. Thinking of that scene, she couldn't help but look forward to it, hoping that day would come soon. That's for sure. He nodded and said, since you want to go to Heaven Mountain, I'll go with you. We'll go home together then. Alright, but I still have to go to the Yen Palace to look for Xiaoze. He went there to settle some matters some time ago. I'm thinking of going to the Yen Palace after I'm done here, and then we can go to the Sky Mountain together. Chapter 1558. Hearing this, Fengzhou smiled and looked at him. Seeing that he had already reached the peak of the Martial Saint rank, he couldn't help but smile. Big brother, it seems that you've had a fortuitous encounter this time. Now that you've reached the peak of the Martial Saint rank, you're very powerful. That's right, I've had a fortuitous encounter, he replied. It was because of this fortuitous encounter that his powers had advanced so quickly. Otherwise, based on his normal cultivation speed, it would have taken him more than 10 years to reach the peak of the Martial Saint rank. Just then, Duan Yingying, who had been lying on the table, woke up. When she opened her eyes and saw the extremely frightening large man standing next to her, she was so frightened that she fell to the ground. Yingying, don't be afraid, he's my big brother. Fengzhou hurriedly stepped forward to help her up as he picked up a pen from the table and wrote something on a piece of paper. However, even after seeing what Fengzhou had written, she was still frightened. Her hands clutched tightly to the corner of Fengzhou's clothes as she hid behind him. She's so timid, Guan Shilin said. She hasn't interacted with many people. Fengzhou patted her hand and wrote on the paper again, if you're afraid, go back to your room first. I'll have a chat with him. Duan Yingying nodded when she saw what he had written. Then, she lifted her skirt and quickly ran out of the pavilion. Because she had turned around in a panic, she tripped and almost fell to the ground. "Hey, be careful!" Fengjiu instinctively shouted. Then, he realized that she couldn't hear him and smiled helplessly. Guan Shilin saw that the man had left, then looked at Fengjiu and smiled. "Xiaojiu, how did this little girl catch your eye? You seem to treat her quite well." "She caught my eye." She smiled. The two of them sat down at the table and chatted. Not long after, she brought him to the small garden to look at the exquisite rainbow flower. "It's that spiritual medicine. Governor Duan has already said that he'll be able to gather all the ingredients in 3 days. Then, we'll leave once we're done." "No problem," he replied. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw that Duan Yingying, who had left earlier, had returned with a tray in her hands. "Look, she's here again." He gestured for her to look behind her. Duan Yingying, who was dressed in a plain dress, was holding a tray in her hands. She had her head lowered, she didn't dare to look at Guan Shilin's, as if she couldn't get used to such a frightening man in this courtyard. When Feng Jiu saw her, she smiled and walked towards her. "Yingying, did you go to cook for us?" She gestured and made a gesture of thanks. Duan Yingying smiled at Shilin Shui's. "She's, Yingying sun that's is, that she's is, Duan, tssst, est, she's yingt, tss that. Isn't it just that I have a bit too much beard that I haven't trimmed? It's not that frightening, is it?" He didn't quite understand. He always walked around like this outside. His appearance was very proper, how was he frightening? "You're not frightening. You've always had a burly physique, but it's changed in the past 2 years. But that's true, cultivating profound energy will affect your body." Hearing her words, Guan Shilin lowered his head to look at himself and smiled. "I think this is actually pretty good. I can even scare people a little." Chapter 1559. "Shaolin, why are you the only one back? Where's your brother? Didn't you bring some people with you when you left? Why didn't they escort you back?" City Lord Duan asked his daughter, whose complexion was not too good. His voice was filled with concern. "I went to look for Big Brother, but he wasn't there. They said that he went out with the team to gain experience, so I left him a letter and came back first. But something happened on the way back. A few guards died in order to protect me. I even met another person on the way back." Speaking to there, she suddenly stopped. Her face was filled with anger. "I also met someone on the way back. We agreed to travel together, but who would have thought that person would set his eyes on my treasures? In the end, I was so angry that I killed him." She did not dare to say that she had been taken advantage of, so she could only change her story. Since that person was dead, no one would know that she had almost been taken advantage of. As for that red-clothed young master, who knew where he ran off to? They definitely would not meet again. So it's like that. City Lord Duan nodded and let out a sigh of relief. "It's good that you're back safe and sound. Next time, just let the guards do these things. Fortunately, you're fine this time." "I know. Next time I go out, I'll definitely bring more people." Hearing that, City Lord Duan smiled. He thought of the matter with Fengjiu and said, "That's right, there's an important guest in the family. You can't offend the important guest." "What important guest?" she asked curiously. "He is an esteemed guest who came to treat your grandfather's illness. He is someone who possesses both the Alchemy Saint Master and Alchemy Saint Master emblems. Right now, he is living in your elder sister's courtyard. Since you have returned, you should pay your elder sister a visit later." "Is that person a man or a woman? Why is he living in my sister's courtyard? Does that person not know that my sister is mute and deaf? Look at what you're saying." No matter what, she's still your sister from the same mother. How can you say that? City Lord Duan scolded in a deep voice. Duan Linlin curled her lips. I didn't say anything wrong. She's mute and deaf. She can't hear me when I talk to her. I'm too lazy to sit with her. She stood up and pushed him out of the door. Daddy, I want to take a hot bath and rest. Go, go. Don't nag here. You're getting more and more impudent. City Lord Duan shook his head and walked out of the room. As soon as he stepped out, the door closed with a bang, causing him to sigh helplessly. This child has been spoiled rotten by them. When he thought of his eldest daughter, he felt a little guilty. For so many years, because she was deaf and mute, she had never participated in any of the family's banquets and rarely appeared in front of outsiders. Over time, everyone outside knew that he had a daughter, but they didn't know that there was another daughter in the courtyard who couldn't speak or hear, speaking of which, he didn't care about her as much as their eldest brother. The reason why Ying was able to live in that courtyard was because his eldest son personally asked his father, saying that Ying's personality was gentle, kind, and optimistic. It was best for her to live in that courtyard and take care of the flowers and herbs. For so many years, once she had something to do, it was like she was cut off from the rest of the world. She didn't know anything that happened in the manor. Chapter 1560. At noon, Master Duan came to the courtyard to invite Fingzhou and Guan Shilin to the front of the courtyard for lunch. However, instead of Fingzhou, he saw Guan Shilin in the pavilion in the garden. He was slightly surprised and stepped forward to ask, Brother Guan, what are you doing here? Guan Shilin opened his eyes and stood up when he saw who it was. So it's Master Duan. What brings you here? Is there something you need? It's like this. I wanted to invite the two of you to the front of the courtyard for lunch. Lunch? There's no need for that. My little brother is busy right now. She told me not to disturb her. Besides, this courtyard is quite nice. We don't lack anything. Hearing this, Master Duan's eyes flashed. I see. All right then. Then I won't disturb you. He nodded and turned to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, he stopped and turned back with a smile. If there's anything you need, feel free to look for me. Thank you for taking care of my daughter while she's here. Don't worry, Master Duan. He nodded. After watching him leave, he sat back down and closed his eyes to cultivate. Meanwhile, in Fengzhou's room, she was concentrating on mixing medicinal liquids. The bottles and jars on the table were filled with various medicinal essences. The entire room was filled with a strong medicinal smell. Because there were only the 3 of them in this courtyard, after Fengzhou told her to go into the room to mix the medicine, Guan Shilin was cultivating in the pavilion. Duan Yingying, who was free, remembered Fengzhou's words and didn't disturb them. However, she thought that they would be hungry when it was time to eat, so she prepared the meal first. She didn't send the meal to Fengzhou's room because Fengzhou told her not to disturb her before she came out. As for the man named Guan Shilin, she was very afraid of him. Especially when Fengzhou wasn't around, she didn't dare to send the meal over. Because of this, she stood in the kitchen in a daze, not knowing what to do. After hesitating for a long time, she left a portion for Fengzhou, placed the food on the table outside the kitchen, and went to the front to look for Guan Shilin. Guan Shilin, who was cultivating with his eyes closed, heard footsteps approaching. He exhaled softly and opened his eyes. He saw the girl who was hesitating about whether she should go forward with a piece of paper in her hand. He was stunned for a moment. He took it and looked at it. It said, "Brother Guan, it's time to eat." He was surprised when he saw the words on it. After all, this little girl was very timid, and Xiao Zhou was not here. He thought that she would hide far away from him. Thus, he grinned and stood up. "All right, let's go eat. Let's go." He gestured and watched as she swallowed her saliva and took a few steps back. He then smiled and strode into the kitchen. Duan Yingying was afraid because the man was so strong that it scared her. He looked like a bear and was very scary. She didn't want to be alone with him, so she walked around Fengzhou's room to see if she had come out. When she first saw Fengzhou, she knew that she was a girl because she had a faint feminine scent. When she saw that Fengzhou's door was not open, she paused for a moment and then walked into the kitchen. However, when she arrived at the kitchen and saw what was happening, she was stunned. She stood to the side and watched. Chapter 1561. When he saw Duan Yingying standing there, he said, "I've finished everything." Then, he remembered that she couldn't hear him, so he gestured again. Duan Yingying came back to her senses, glanced at him, and went to clean up the table. Guan Shilin was a little embarrassed. After all, she wasn't a servant, and it wasn't right for her to cook and clean the table, so he helped to bring the food into the kitchen. When he saw the food in the kitchen, he thought that it was for Xiaozhou, so he smiled and said, "Actually, you don't have to leave it for her. She might leave her room tonight, so she won't need to eat when she gets busy." When he saw her tilting her head and looking at him blankly, he realized and smiled, "I forgot that you can't hear. Have you eaten?" He gestured as if he was eating. Duan Yingying looked at him, took a step back, shook her head, and then nodded. "Have you eaten or not? If you haven't, you can eat Xiaozhou's portion. You really don't have to leave it for her. She definitely won't come out." He pointed at the food on the side, but she looked at him defensively, as if she didn't know what he was talking about. Seeing this, he thought that he should leave first. He couldn't communicate with her anyway. However, just as he was about to turn and leave, he heard her stomach grumble. He couldn't help but be stunned. "You really didn't eat?" He was really embarrassed this time. The food was cooked by others, and he actually finished it by himself. She didn't eat. When he thought of this and saw that this little girl was guarding against him, he didn't say anything more. He walked around the kitchen, not caring if she could hear him or not, and said, "Since it's like this, I'll cook a bowl of noodles for you. Consider it as a thank you for cooking for us." Duan Yingying stood to the side. She only saw Guan Shilin's mouth move, but couldn't hear what he was saying. She should have left, but she stayed out of curiosity. She saw him looking around the kitchen, and then he began to knead the noodles. Seeing such a burly man busying himself in the kitchen, she only felt that this scene was very strange. As time passed, she watched him make noodles, add soup, eggs, meat, and other things like that. Finally, he brought out a big bowl of noodles. Was he still not full? Just as she was thinking about this, she saw him waving at her. She paused for a moment, and saw him pointing at the bowl of noodles, gesturing for her to eat quickly. She was stunned, with her eyes and mouth wide open in disbelief. She quickly took out a pen and paper and wrote a question, "For me?" Guan Shili nodded and took the paper from her. He smiled and wrote, "Try it." She nodded at Guan and continued to eat, and continued to eat, her eyes as she nodded and nodded, she continued to eat, she continued to eat, the noodles, she, teat, her tess eat. Seeing that she was eating happily, Guan Shilin quietly left and walked towards the small garden, intending to stretch his body. As for Fengzhou, just as Guan Shilin expected, she didn't leave the room until evening. When she came out, she had a bright smile on her face, and it was obvious that she had successfully concocted the medicine. Chapter 1562. It hadn't even been half a day, right? The two of them seemed to be getting along quite well. Did something happen while she was gone? Did something happen that she didn't know about? Brother, why is Ying playing chess with you here? She asked as she walked over. Guan Shilin was just thinking about his next move when he saw her. He quickly waved at her with a smile. Xiao Jiu. Come, sit down. Tell me what move I should make. He was relatively good at cultivation, but he rarely played this kind of chess game. After playing 3 games, he lost all 3 games in a row. His face was about to be lost to his family. How can I do that? I can't help you with this. She sat down beside him and looked at their chess pieces. She smiled. Brother, you'll lose no matter how you play. You're almost at a dead end. Alright, I admit defeat. I'm no match for you. He waved at Duan Yingying, indicating that he was done playing. Brother, why is Yingying playing chess with you here? She doesn't seem to be afraid of you anymore. What did you do? Fengjiu asked curiously. She asked me to eat after she finished cooking. I thought she had already eaten, so I finished all the food. Then, I heard her stomach growling, so I made her a bowl of noodles. This little girl is easy to bribe. Her attitude towards me changed so much after a bowl of noodles. At this point, he grinned and felt that it was a little unbelievable. So a bowl of noodles could ease her fear of him. It seemed that he wasn't that scary after all. I'll go cook. Duan Yingying smiled at the two of them. She wrote something on the paper and was about to stand up, but Fengjiu pressed her down and sat her back down. Let's not eat here today. Let's go out and eat. We can walk around the night market while we're at it. Fengjiu suggested. Sure. Guan Shilin agreed. Duan Yingying couldn't hear what they were talking about. She was confused until she saw Fengjiu write something on the paper. She wrote something down in surprise and asked, I can go too. Of course, I'll bring you along. You just have to let your father know. Fengjiu wrote. I'll do it. Guan Shilin stood up and walked outside. Let's go, I'll take you to change. She pulled her to her room and picked out a light green dress for her. After changing into a light green dress, she looked much gentler. On the other hand, the Duan family head was stunned when he heard Guan Shilin's words. Brother Guan, you're saying that you're taking Yingying outside? That's right, we'll be eating out tonight. We'll probably be back later, but don't worry, City Lord, we'll definitely send Miss Duan back safely, he said in a deep voice. The Duan family's patriarch quickly nodded. All right. No problem. I'll have to trouble you with my daughter. It's my duty. He nodded and turned to leave. The city lord looked at his back view as he left. He was a little confused. Why was this pair of brothers so strange? On the other hand, Fengjiu held Yingying's hand as they walked out of the courtyard and towards the front yard. When they were waiting for her brother, they bumped into Duan Linlin, the second daughter of the Duan family. It's you. Why are you at my house? Duan Linlin, who was about to look for her father, didn't look at her twin sister. Instead, she stared at the dazzling young man in red. Chapter 1563. When she thought about how he had seen her naked appearance, her face immediately turned red and green. She did not dare to look at Fengjiu again and only felt her face burning with embarrassment. When Duan Yingying saw her, she happily went forward to hold her hand and gestured, silently calling her sister. However, she was flung away. She staggered and almost fell to the ground. Fortunately, Fengjiu supported her. Why are you pulling me? Duan Linlin glared at her unhappily. She didn't treat her as an elder sister at all. In her opinion, this elder sister who was born earlier than her was a disgrace. Moreover, it was a disgrace who looked exactly like her. Duan Yingying, who was flung away, lowered her head sadly and quietly stood beside Fingzhou, not moving forward. Although she couldn't hear or speak, her mind was sensitive. She knew that her sister did not like her. Fingzhou only glanced at Duan Linlin indifferently, then left with Yingying. She did not have a good impression of Duan Linlin, so she did not even have the interest to talk to her. Seeing the young man in red holding her sister's hand and leaving, Duan Linlin could not help but shout, "Hey, who are you? Why are you in my house? What's wrong? Who is this?" A deep and displeased voice sounded. The unfamiliar voice startled Duan Linlin and she turned around. When she saw a tall and sturdy man with a large beard walking towards her, her face turned pale and she quickly retreated to the side. Who are you?" Duan Linlin asked with a trembling voice. "Brother, let's go," Fingzhou called out, indicating for him to ignore her. "N." Guan Shili nodded, glanced at the face that was exactly the same as Duan Yingying's, then looked away. He walked past her and came to Fingzhou's side. "I've already told the mayor, let's go." Seeing the three of them walk out of the mansion, she could not help but open her mouth, her face full of shock. Her deaf-mute elder sister had not stepped out of the city lord's manor for so many years. If she went out like this, would the people outside think that she was her? Thinking of this, her face instantly turned ugly. She immediately ran to her father's courtyard, intending to ask for an explanation. On the other side, Fengzhou and Guan Shilin brought Duan Yingying, who was out for the first time, to the street. Duan Yingying couldn't hide her curiosity when she saw the trinkets displayed on both sides of the street. She walked and looked around, occasionally stopping to play with them. She actually bought a lot of things. Isn't that the red-clothed young master? He's a venerable with 2 sacred master emblems. I didn't expect him to come out for a stroll today. It's really a surprise to see him. Look at that woman in the middle, isn't that the city lord's daughter, Duan Linlin? She is the #1 beauty in our city. Her facial features are really outstanding, and her temperament is very gentle. She is really beautiful. But who is that bearded man? Why are you following us? It seems like he might be a bodyguard or something. Listening to the whispers of the people around them, the three of them found a restaurant by the window and sat down after shopping. They ordered a few dishes and wine to eat while admiring the lively night view of the people coming and going on the street outside. That night, the most excited person could be said to be Duan Yingying. That night, she saw things that she had not seen for a long time, and finally saw how wonderful the outside world was. Chapter 1564. Seeing the red figure disappear into the main gate of the city lord's manor, 4 people in grey walked out from the shadows. One of them asked, "Why didn't you make a move? With our strength, it's more than enough to take her life. This is the city lord's territory, so there's no rush. She'll leave this place, so we can make a move on the road." One of them said. "That's right, we can set a trap on the road and wait for her to jump in. She's just a woman, how powerful can she be? Leave 2 people to keep an eye on her. Remember, don't get too close to avoid being discovered." One of them said and left 2 people to keep watch, while the other 2 quietly left in the night. As for Feng Jiu and the others, the city lord was still waiting for them when they returned to the mansion. When he saw the 3 of them enter the mansion, the city lord, who had been waiting in the front yard, came to them. After glancing at his daughter, he looked at Feng Jiu and asked, "Young Master Feng, have you all eaten supper? I've asked the kitchen to prepare it for you." "Thank you, City Lord, we just ate outside and came back," Fengzhou said and smiled apologetically. "If we knew you were waiting here, we would have come back earlier." He, it's fine, it's fine." He waved his hand and said, "Oh right, the medicine is all here. That's good, I'll go over tomorrow morning." It's getting late, so we should go back and rest, she said and nodded before walking forward. Ying looked at her father and smiled at him before leaving with Fengjiu. Guan Shilin laughed loudly and said to the City Lord, rest early. After saying that, he also left. After returning to the courtyard, the three of them each took a bath. Fengjiu found Guan Shilin, brother, I'm going to help Ying with her acupuncture tonight. Help me guard her. Okay, don't worry. Leave it to me, he replied and went to Ying's room with her. Fengjiu pushed the door open and went in. She saw Ying in her underwear waiting for her. She smiled and walked to the table to write a sentence, don't be nervous. Duan Ying nodded, but she still swallowed her saliva from time to time. She couldn't help but feel nervous. Today, when they were outside, Fengjiu said that he could cure her deafness and muteness. She was stunned when she heard it. Could it be cured? Her brother had found many people to treat these people, but no one said that they could cure her. She thought that she would be like this for the rest of her life, forever unable to hear the voice of the world, unable to hear the voice of her family, unable to make a sound. She didn't dare to have extravagant hopes, but when Fengjiu said that she could cure it, she almost didn't dare to believe it. Even so, her heart still held a trace of hope. Fengjiu told her that he could cure her deafness and muteness. She only had one request, and that was to not tell anyone that her deafness and muteness was cured. She wanted her to listen to the voices around her and see the attitude of her family. She even told her that if she could find someone who didn't mind her deafness and muteness, she could give her life to him. She even told her that when her deafness and muteness were cured, she could go out more and see the scenery of other places. She didn't want to stay in this courtyard forever. She also told her that when her deafness and muteness were cured, the blocked veins in her body would be able to circulate again and she could start cultivating. Chapter 1565. Drink this medicine and lie down on the bed, Fengjiu gestured as he handed her a bottle of medicine and took out a silver needle from his space. Duan Ying took it and drank the medicine without hesitation. She then lay down on the bed with her hands on her abdomen and looked at him nervously. Fengjiu smiled at her, took out a needle and inserted it into her fainting point, then began to perform acupuncture on her. Because the main places to perform acupuncture were the head and behind the ears, and because Ying was nervous, he could only make her unconscious so that she wouldn't move around due to nervousness. Acupuncture on the head had to be done with the most care, as the slightest carelessness could cause a mistake. Since it was a matter of life and death, she naturally couldn't be careless. Because of this, she had her brother stand guard outside. This way, even if someone disturbed her, it wouldn't affect her acupuncture. That night, Fengjiu was treating Ying while Guan Shilin sat cross-legged outside the room. In the main courtyard, Mayor Duan couldn't sleep because of his nervousness. Tomorrow was the day for his father's treatment. Could he really be cured? Even if Master Feng said that there was no problem, he still couldn't relax until the results were out. As for Duan Linlin, she was so annoyed that she couldn't sleep. In the evening, she went to find her father and found out that the young man in red was here to treat her grandfather. Her father also told her not to offend him. However, when she thought of what happened on the road, she couldn't pretend that nothing happened. What was even more hateful was that the young man with the surname Feng was so good to her deaf and mute sister. He even took her out to play. Why? That night, she couldn't sleep the entire night. In the middle of the night, Fengjiu came out of Ying's room. Seeing Guan Shilin standing up, she smiled and said, "Brother, go back to sleep. How's that little girl? When will she see the results?" he asked. "When she wakes up tomorrow, if nothing unexpected happens, her hearing will gradually recover. She should be able to hear clearly in about a day or so. As for her vocal cords, she'll be able to speak when she wakes up tomorrow." However, she probably hasn't spoken for so many years, so it'll be difficult at first. Hearing this, Guan Shilin smiled and nodded, saying, "That little girl is lucky to have met a ghost doctor like you. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to think about it in this lifetime. That's because she and I are fated. Look at the other one, although they look exactly the same, I don't have any good feelings for her." She smiled and stretched her waist and shook her hands. "I have to go back to sleep. I still have to treat that old man Duan in the morning." Guan Shili nodded. "Go. Don't worry and sleep, I'll wake you tomorrow." "Okay, then I'll go back to my room first." She then walked into her room. Duan, Duan Lin Lin and Duan, Duan Duan Lin Lin and, Dun, Duan, Duan, Du Duan, Duan Duan Lin Lin ants. "Ying, how are you feeling today? Is there anything different?" She smiled and asked as she came to her side. Duan Ying looked at her and listened to her voice. Her ears buzzed as if there were some sounds, but she couldn't hear them clearly. Even so, she was overjoyed. She habitually took out a pen and paper, wanting to tell Fingzhou that she could hear some sounds. However, Fingzhou stopped her from writing and smiled at her. Chapter 1566. Duan Ying nervously moved her lips and carefully called out, "Feng, Fingzhou." When the hoarse voice carefully came out of her mouth, although the voice was hoarse and unpleasant to the ear, it still made her so excited that tears flowed out. I can speak. I can speak." Her hands tightly grasped Fingzhou's hand as she spoke with a trembling voice. She was so excited and happy that she couldn't control herself. Guan Shilin on the side laughed loudly. "This is nothing. If Xiao Jiu says that he can cure you, then he can definitely cure you." He was extremely confident in his sister's medical skills. In this world, his sister could definitely cure any illness that others couldn't. Fengzhou revealed a smile and said, "Because you haven't spoken for a long time, your voice will be hoarse. But don't worry, when you eat more nourishing food, your voice will slowly recover." Duan Ying nodded. Her ears still couldn't hear clearly, but she could vaguely hear it. For her, this was already something she didn't dare to hope for in the past. Remember, don't speak in front of others. Calm down and cook some nourishing food to eat. Here is a bottle of medicinal liquid. Take it 3 times a day. She took out a bottle of medicinal liquid and gave it to her, then said, "We will probably be back in the evening, you don't have to wait." After that, she went out with Guan Shilin. Today, the treatment for old Master Duan was in another family's ice cellar, so they had to go out. When they reached the front yard, the Duan family's master, who had been waiting for a long time, saw Fingzhou come out and sighed in relief. He hurriedly walked up. "Young Master Feng, everything is ready. We can set off now." Fengzhou nodded and walked out with him. They got into the carriage that was prepared outside and went to the other family's residence together. On the Meng family's side, the Meng family's master knew that they would come today, so he waited outside the manor. When he saw the carriage slowly approaching, his gaze swept past the front and landed on the carriage behind. The one sitting inside should be that red-clothed youngster with 2 sacred expert emblems, right? The carriage in front stopped, and City Lord Duan got down first. He cupped his hands and smiled at the Meng family head. "Brother Meng, sorry to disturb you today." "It's nothing." He smiled and cupped his hands, saying, "The ice bed is ready. We're just waiting for you, City Lord." After a brief exchange of pleasantries, Governor Duan ordered his men to bring his unconscious father to the Meng family's ice cellar. Guan Shilin was the first to step out of the carriage, followed by Fingzhou, who was dressed in a dazzling red robe. Although he knew that it was a young man, the Meng family's patriarch was still surprised when he saw the handsome young man in his 20s. It was really so small. This must be young Master Feng. The Meng family's patriarch stepped forward and cupped his hands in greeting. He smiled and said, "Seeing you in person is better than hearing about you." Fengjiu looked at the person in front of him and nodded with a smile. Master Meng. City Lord Duan had mentioned him before. "Young Master Feng, please come in." He gestured for him to enter and then turned to the side to invite him in. At this time, he noticed the black-clothed man beside him. He couldn't help but be surprised and secretly sized him up. Chapter 1567. Seeing him staring at Guan Shilin, Fengjiu just smiled faintly and walked in with him. Mayor Duan first led his people to follow Patriarch Meng's people to the ice cellar, then Fengjiu and the others followed. Patriarch Meng glanced at Fengjiu, then said to the mayor, "If there's anything else you need, just say it. If it's within my ability, I won't refuse." Hearing this, the mayor's impression of the Meng family deepened. He nodded and smiled, "Brother Meng, don't worry. If there's anything I need, I won't be polite. You've helped me a lot this time. If there's anything I can help you with in the future, don't hesitate to ask." Ha ha ha, the mayor's words are too serious. Patriarch Meng was delighted. He knew that after this incident, Mayor Duan wouldn't sit idly by if anything happened to the Meng family in the future. This was enough. When they arrived at the ice cellar, Fengjiu stopped in his tracks. "Mayor, just follow me in. The rest of you stay outside. If the door isn't open from the inside, no one is allowed to come in. Don't worry. With me here, no one will mess around." Guan Shilin laughed heartily and patted his chest to reassure her. Fengjiu smiled and nodded to him. Then, he and Mayor Duan pushed open the stone door and entered the ice cellar. As soon as they entered, the cold air hit them in the face. Their whole body was quickly filled with cold air, and all the pores on their body seemed to open. Feeling the strong cold air, she immediately circulated her spiritual energy and circulated it through her veins. After a while, her whole body warmed up. Mayor Duan also circulated his spiritual energy to protect his body. He looked at Fengjiu and asked, "Young Master Feng, do you need me to do anything? Take off your father's clothes." As Fengjiu spoke, she glanced at the table beside her. She had asked her to put it here so that it would be convenient for her to arrange her things. "Okay." Governor Duan personally stepped forward to take off his unconscious father's clothes. After all, there was no one here who could do such a thing. However, the closer he got to the millennium-chilling ice bed, the more bone-chilling cold he felt. Especially when he saw his half-naked father lying on the ice bed with a thin layer of ice gradually condensing on his body and face, he became even more worried. In such a cold place, he didn't have any spiritual energy to protect his body. Could his body bear it? Would there be any problems with his body? Thinking, he asked worriedly, "Young Master Feng, my father doesn't have any spiritual energy to protect his body. Is it really okay for him to lie on the millennium-chilling ice bed like this?" Fengjiu frowned slightly, glanced at him, and said, "City Lord Duan, since you've asked me to treat your father, don't question my method. Besides, I haven't made a move yet, but if I do, I hope you won't make any noise to disturb me." As she spoke, she picked up a small knife and wiped it. She looked at him and said, "Actually, I alone am enough for this treatment. I asked you to come in because I want you to personally see how I treat your father. However, if you disturb me halfway, then this treatment will fail and your father's life will be ruined." Chapter 1568. At this moment, the dignified city lord lowered his head and apologized like a child who had done something wrong. Fengjiu did not say anything else and only said to the city lord, "First, seal your father's acupuncture points." "Okay." The city lord responded and condensed spiritual power in his fingers to seal his father's acupuncture points. Then, he retreated to the side and waited for Feng Jiu's next instructions. At this moment, Feng Jiu stepped forward and inserted the silver needles into every acupoint. Then, she stretched her hand toward Old Master Duan's waist as if she was looking for something. When she felt the wriggling under his skin, she inserted the silver needles between her fingers into his body. The city lord did not dare to disturb them, and even his breathing became lighter. When he saw Feng Jiu's silver needle pierce a wriggling worm that was as thick as a finger, he could not help but feel his heart skip a beat. He could feel that the worm that was nailed to the ground by the silver needle could not move, but it was still alive. After nailing one of the worms, he could even see the other side of the worm wriggling. Almost in an instant, the worm that was not nailed to the ground moved under his skin and flesh and then disappeared, as if it had moved to another place. At this moment, he saw Feng Jiu take the spirit medicine with both hands, pluck the leaves of the spirit medicine, crush it and drip the medicine juice. Then, she poured the medicine juice into his father's mouth, nose, and ears. Finally, she injected the ice attribute contained in the 2 ice attribute crystal cores into his father's body. In an instant, he saw his father's body, which was originally covered in a thin layer of ice, quickly stiffen. The blood in his body was gradually frozen and the blood in his body could not circulate. In addition, the extremely cold 1,000-year chilling ice bed was transmitting 1,000-year chilling ice chi under his body. In almost a moment, he felt his father's breath. At this moment, his heart stopped. He wanted to go forward and stop them, but he forced himself to endure. His hands were tightly clenched into fists as he stood there. At this moment, he only felt a bone-chilling cold. It was as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. The only thing that echoed in his mind was, his father is dead. He didn't know how much time had passed, but when he saw Feng Jiu use another silver needle to pierce his father's body, as if nailing something, he could only hear the sound of his own saliva swallowing and the sound of his heart beating like thunder. City Lord Duan, unseal his acupoints. Feng Jiu's hands were busy. He used his spiritual power to remove the frost on Father Duan's body while using his spiritual power to protect his heart meridian. However, after she spoke, she did not see any movement from City Lord Duan. Thus, she raised her head and frowned as she shouted, "City Lord Duan, quickly unseal your father's acupoints." Ah! Oh, yes, yes. He suddenly came back to his senses and hurriedly unsealed the acupoints that were previously sealed. After unsealing them, he saw her using the sharp knife from before to cut his father's body. Perhaps it was because the 1,000-year chilling ice bed was too cold and the person lying on it was almost frozen stiff. The moment the knife cut, he saw a small trace of blood seeping out. Then, he saw Feng Jiu pull out a golden worm that was pierced by a silver needle from between the skin and flesh. When he saw the golden worm, his heart jumped violently. Only then did he realize that although his father's breathing was extremely weak, he had recovered a trace of vitality. Chapter 1569. Unlike the atmosphere in the ice cellar, Mayor Meng didn't leave. Instead, he stood outside the ice cellar and looked at the burly man at the stone door. He smiled and said, "How should I address you?" Guan Shilin, who was guarding the stone door like a guardian, glanced at him and said, "My surname is Guan." "Oh, so it's Brother Guan." Patriarch Meng nodded and said with a smile, "I see that young Master Feng trusts you a lot. Is Brother Guan one of young Master Feng's people?" Hearing this, Guan Shilin smiled. He knew that Patriarch Meng was trying to get information out of him, so he only said, "Yes, I'm sure I'm one of her people. I'm responsible for her safety." "I see." Patriarch Meng looked at him and said, "But judging from Brother Guan's aura, you don't seem like an ordinary guard. I think you must have a big background." "Ha ha ha, Patriarch Meng, you're mistaken. In fact, I'm just a mercenary who's trying to make a living. I don't have much of a background." He laughed loudly and chatted with him casually, just to pass the time. On the other side, Duan Linlin, who took advantage of the fact that Feng Jiu and the others were not in the city lord mansion, ran to Duan Yingying's courtyard. After searching everywhere, she found her sister, who looked exactly like her, was in the kitchen. Thus, she angrily walked forward and pulled her out. When she was outside, she forcefully flung her hand and flung her away. She angrily shouted, "Let me ask you, why is that young man in red living in the same courtyard as you? Don't forget that you're deaf and mute. You can't afford to offend someone like that." Duan Yingying looked at her in a daze. Hearing her sister's words, she couldn't help but lower her head and stand there helplessly. "Yes, how could I forget that you're deaf and mute? It'd be strange if you could hear me. Scolding you is a waste of time and energy." She snorted and glared at her, then turned and left. Duan Yingying raised her head and looked at her sister's angry figure leaving. She lowered her eyes and turned back to the kitchen to cook. She had never thought of comparing herself to others. Living in this courtyard, she endured loneliness alone. Even if she was unhappy, she would still smile. In the past, she had always been the only one living in this courtyard. In this family, the only one who could make her happy and make her worry was her elder brother, who only came back once or twice a year. As for the others, she already knew that they all treated her as invisible and didn't like her existence, right? On the contrary, Fengzhou treated her so well even though she was just a passerby. Not only did he cure her deafness and muteness, he also taught her to see through people. Just as Guan Dage said, she was lucky. It was because of her luck that she was able to meet Fengzhou, the person who changed her life. After noon, the stone door of the Meng family's ice house finally opened from the inside. The first to walk out was Fengzhou, dressed in red. His expression was the same as before, but there was a hint of fatigue between his brows. "Done. Are you tired? If you're tired, go back and rest." Guan Shilin was the first to go up to Fengzhou's side. As soon as he got close, he could feel the cold air around him and immediately frowned. "The cold air around you is very strong." As he spoke, he looked at the Meng family head and said, "Meng family head, can I trouble you to have someone check if the ginger soup I asked you to make is ready?" Okay. I'll have someone check the kitchen right away. It should be ready." As he spoke, he ordered someone to check the kitchen. Chapter 1570. Young Master Feng, why don't you rest in my humble abode first? Family Head Mang suggested. "Thank you for your kindness, Family Head Mang. I'm fine. I'll rest in the carriage for a while." She thanked him with a smile, nodded at him, and walked out first. City Lord Duan, who walked out behind her, seemed to be dizzy. After seeing this scene with his own eyes, the feelings in his heart were indescribable. After instructing people to send his father back to the City Lord mansion, he said goodbye to Family Head Meng and then went out. Family Head Meng naturally sent him off. However, when they arrived outside, they were stunned when they saw the scene outside. They saw that a large number of people had gathered in front of the Meng mansion. These people were all wearing badges. They were either pharmacists or alchemists. They blocked the road. It could be said that even if they wanted to go back, there was no way for the carriage to leave. At the very front of these people, there were two people they recognized. They were the two rather famous Saint expert-level alchemists and pharmacists in the city. Only, when they saw their formation, it made City Lord Duan and Meng family's patriarch a bit surprised. What were they doing here? Get out of the way. If you don't get out of the way, I won't be polite. A low voice with anger entered their ears. Only then did they notice that Fengjiu and Guan Shilin's carriage was still there. Moreover, it was surrounded and couldn't get out at all. They immediately stepped forward and came in front of the two alchemists. "The two of you, what's going on? Did something happen?" City Lord Duan asked with a trace of doubt in his eyes. When the two saw the City Lord come out, they looked at each other and said, "City Lord, we heard that a young man with 2 saint badges came to the city, so we came to take a look. Because some alchemists suspect that his badges are fake." Hearing this, family head Meng was stunned and looked at City Lord Duan. After being stunned for a while, City Lord Duan smiled and said, "You two worry too much. Even if I didn't check young Master Feng's 2 badges, I know that the 2 badges are definitely not fake. Because his strength and ability are there, there's no way they can be faked." As he spoke, he paused and said, "You two have been staying here for a long time, so you probably don't know. Today is the day that young Master Feng treated my father. Moreover, the treatment has already ended, and we are preparing to go home. My father's disease has also been cured by young Master Feng. I saw all of this with my own eyes." "Your father's disease has been cured. Can you let us take a look?" one of them asked. "This? I'm afraid not." He hesitated, but he still refused. "If we didn't see it with our own eyes, how can you expect us to believe that it's true?" The other person also spoke, his attitude very resolute. "Why should I let you see it with your own eyes? Whether you believe it or not, what?" A clear and cold voice that carried a trace of laziness sounded from the other carriage, making everyone who heard this voice feel a wave of anger. This was especially true for the 2 sacred experts in the lead, who even more so felt like their dignity was being insulted. "Humph. The 2 of us are alchemists in the city, the leaders of all alchemists and pharmacists. If someone really dares to pretend to be alchemists, we won't let them off easily." Chapter 1571. You're not allowed to leave. A shout rang out as 2 sacred masters blocked the carriage. The surrounding alchemists and pharmacists who felt that the situation wasn't serious enough all surrounded the carriage and blocked the road, as if they didn't want the person in the carriage to leave just like that. City Lord Duan saw that the development of the situation was a little unexpected, and his face couldn't help but darken as he frowned. His sharp gaze swept across the crowd as he asked in a deep voice, "What are you all doing? Why aren't you all retreating?" Of course, he only dared to shout at those alchemists and pharmacists. He didn't dare to shout at those 2 sacred masters. After all, the status of a sacred master wasn't inferior to him, the City Lord. "City Lord, this person is very likely to be a fake. If that's really the case, then we definitely can't sit by and do nothing." The 2 sacred masters looked at the City Lord and said in a deep voice, "Please forgive us, City Lord." However, at this time, Guan Shilin had already driven the carriage forward. Looking at those people blocking the road, he snorted coldly and swung the horsewhip in his hand forward. With a shrill sound, it cracked in the air before it was pulled back and swung to the left and right. Paw! Paw! The sharp whip made 2 slapping sounds. When those alchemists saw this, they didn't dare to block the carriage and retreated. Even if they were unwilling, they didn't want to be whipped for no reason. However, just as the carriage moved forward, the 2 sacred masters' faces darkened. No one had ever dared to disrespect them like this. Immediately, the 2 of them shouted in a deep voice, "Stop them." As soon as the voice fell, 2 nascent soul powerhouses appeared out of nowhere and blocked the road. Seeing the 2 nascent soul powerhouses appear, the surrounding alchemists quickly retreated with joy in their hearts. Let's see how they can leave this time. A young man could hold 2 sacred master badges. They definitely had reason to believe that the badges were fake. Drag the young man in the carriage out for me. One of the sacred masters shouted in a deep voice as he stared at the carriage with a sharp gaze. What an arrogant young man. In front of these two sacred experts, he actually dared to avoid them and hide inside. Feng Jiu was wronged. They left the Mang mansion and the carriage stopped directly in front of the Mang mansion. Feng Jiu got into the carriage and Guan Shilin chased the coachman away. Feng Jiu got into the carriage and Guan Shilin asked him to be the coachman. Feng Jiu got into the carriage and walked for a while before they were surrounded by people. Speaking of which, the current situation was really not caused by them. Moreover, they had already retreated time and time again. Who would have thought that these people would not let go, and each and every one of them would treat them as soft persimmons to pinch? With that, he saw the two nascent soul cultivators charging at the carriage. His eyes turned cold and he extended his hand. In a flash of light, his long saber appeared in his hand. I'll let you have a taste of my blade. A low and deep voice that contained a powerful profound energy aura was emitted. Once the pressure of a martial saint was released, a powerful airflow enveloped the entire area, causing the faces of the alchemists to change. One by one, they retreated in shock. They were good at refining pills and making medicine, but they weren't good at fighting. They had always stayed as far away from these people as possible. If they were careless and got injured, they would have nowhere to cry. Whoosh! Whoosh! Chapter 1572. Hearing the commotion outside, Fengjiu lifted the curtain and stood aside, leaning against the carriage to watch her brother fight with the two people. He was now a martial saint at the pinnacle, and he had experienced real combat outside, so his combat power should be stronger than her grandfather's. She hadn't seen him fight for a long time, and now she wanted to see if he could fight against two nascent soul cultivators alone. Looking outside, she saw that one of the two nascent soul cultivators was tangling with him, and the other was grabbing towards her, as if trying to pull her off the carriage. Seeing this scene, she curled her lips and glanced at the two alchemists and pharmacists wearing the Sage Master's badge. Guan Shilin waved the large saber in his hand and slashed at the side of one of the nascent soul cultivators. The nascent soul cultivator in front of him couldn't dodge in time, and his robe was cut open, and blood seeped out from the side of his waist. Damn it! How dare you hurt me? He was a nascent soul cultivator at the pinnacle, and in a 2-on-1 situation, he was injured by the other party. This made him so angry that he wanted to kill Guan Shilin. He immediately pulled out his long sword, and with a shake of the sword's tip, he stabbed towards Guan Shilin with a fierce murderous aura. However, after Guan Shilin swung his saber, he quickly retreated and swung his saber horizontally, blocking the other man's hand that was about to grab the carriage. The man could only feel the sharp blade coming down from above. The killing intent and the smell of blood in the air frightened him. If he hadn't instinctively retracted his hand would have fallen to the ground from the chop. Subdue him first. The two nascent soul cultivators looked at each other and said, and attacked Guan Shilin together. On the side, City Lord Duan and Family Lord Meng were stunned, and their eyes were filled with disbelief. Guan Shilin was only a martial saint at the pinnacle. Although his strength was not low, he cultivated dark force aura, so how could he be a match for a spiritual power cultivator? But he was able to calmly deal with two nascent soul cultivators by himself, and force them to join forces. This kind of combat power really shocked them. Ice Blade! One of the nascent soul cultivators let out a roar and poured spiritual power into his sword. Sword chi flew out and condensed into an icicle in the air. The icicle shot towards the target before anyone could react. Beast Flame! The other nascent soul cultivator also shouted. After he pulled out his sword, his other hand suddenly attacked Guan Shilin. With a whoosh, a stream of spiritual energy burst out from his palm and formed a flame in the air, forming a flaming beast with its mouth wide open. It fiercely pounced on Guan Shilin as if it wanted to swallow him whole. Spiritual power cultivators could use the attributes in their bodies to attack, but profound chi cultivators could only use profound chi and martial force. Their bodies were not categorized into attributes, only strength and speed. However, there were very few mystics who could truly combine strength and speed. As a result, mystics were generally weaker than spirit cultivators. However, the scene before their eyes completely refreshed their understanding of mystics. Chapter 1573. The tip of the blade that exuded a strong stench of blood was pointed at his forehead. The distance between them was less than a finger's length. This extremely close distance caused large beads of cold sweat to appear on the nascent soul cultivator's forehead. He couldn't help but gulp and his heart began to pound. When the other nascent soul cultivator saw this scene, he couldn't help but stop. He looked at the black-robed man with a complicated gaze. It was undeniable that after this exchange, they truly admired his combat strength from the bottom of their hearts. When experts exchanged blows, their strength could be seen as soon as they made a move. This Xian cultivator's combat strength was definitely above theirs. However, when they stopped, not far away from the crowd, a few black-robed men who were standing in a corner saw the scene in front of them. The eyes of the leader moved, and he gave some instructions to the people behind him. Then, he leaped up and attacked Fingzhou in the carriage. As the sacred master commands, drag the person in the carriage out. A sudden shout sounded, startling everyone. They looked in the direction of the voice and saw several black-robed men rush out. They stepped on the shoulders of the alchemists and arrived in front of them to grab Fingzhou in the carriage. Seeing this scene and hearing those words, the two sacred masters were slightly shocked. They looked at each other, but didn't say anything. They both thought that they were on the other side, but they didn't expect that someone was using their name to cause trouble. On the contrary, when they saw those people come out, they snorted heavily and shouted, "That's right. Drag him out. This brat is too arrogant. We must teach him a lesson today." If the two of them, sacred masters, suffered a loss of face at the hands of this youth, how could they face others in the future? Moreover, this youth's two sacred master badges were definitely fake. How could they, as sacred masters, let such a person go? Kering Ling frowned. He had already shown mercy, but these people still wanted to come again. The two of you, please tell them to stop. They can't. Before the city lord could finish speaking, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. Although the several black-clothed men made the action of pulling people out of the carriage, in the next moment, they held a long sword in their hands and with bloodthirsty ferocity, they stabbed towards Fingzhou in the carriage. Seeing this scene, he was so shocked that his heart jumped. He immediately shouted, "Stop!" His figure had already rushed out, trying to stop that person's assassination. At this time, the others also realized that something was wrong. After the Meng family's master recovered from his shock, he quickly stepped forward to help. He stopped one of the black-robed men and shouted in a deep voice, "Who are you? How dare you try to assassinate me in front of my residence?" Clang! The sound of swords clashing against swords filled the air with a sharp killing intent. When the alchemists and pharmacists saw the black-robed men's killing moves, they couldn't help but turn pale and retreat in all directions. The two sacred experts even more so widened their eyes in horror as they looked at the other party, asking at the same time, your people? How is this possible?" The two of them spoke at the same time. They shook their heads vigorously and even took a step back. "I thought it was your men." When they heard this, the two's faces turned pale. They knew that the situation was bad. Even if they wanted to teach that youth a lesson, they didn't think that if that youth died here, the two of them wouldn't be able to escape responsibility. Chapter 1574. Guan Shilin sensed a bloodthirsty murderous aura emanating from them when he saw them draw their swords and stab his sister with murderous intent. He was very familiar with this kind of bloodthirsty murderous aura, but he didn't expect to see it here. Without much thought, he changed the direction of the saber in his hand and slashed at one of the black-robed men. "Your opponent is here." Whoosh! The sharp energy of the saber shot out, creating a terrifying airflow in the air. The black-robed man in front couldn't dodge in time, or perhaps he didn't expect Guan Shilin's speed to be so fast. When he turned around, all he saw was the saber slashing down at him. Hiss! A shrill scream, accompanied by a strong smell of blood, spread in the air. The sharp sound was as unpleasant as the squeal of a pig being slaughtered, causing everyone to tremble in fear. They saw an arm being flung out and thrown into the air before falling to the ground, staining the ground red with blood. The face of the cultivator who had his arm chopped off was twisted and pale, and his hatred was obvious. At that moment, Guan Shilin waved his saber, and his body moved like the wind, arriving in front of the carriage. He waved his saber horizontally in front of him, pointing it diagonally at the ground. His sharp eyes were filled with intimidating pressure as he stared at the black-robed men, and his low voice was filled with murderous intent. "How dare you? How dare you murder people here? Who are you? How dare you assassinate people here?" City Governor Duan and the Meng family head also shouted sternly. They surrounded the carriage and protected Fingzhou, who was in the carriage. They felt that Fingzhou had no combat ability. However, after two of the black-robed men died, the leader stared at Fingzhou, who was sitting in the carriage with deep eyes and a faint smile. He glanced at the people protecting the carriage, gritted his teeth, and blew the whistle in his hand. A sharp and loud whistle rang out, and in just a few breaths' time, 20 to 30 black-robed men surged out from all directions. The weakest among them was at the nascent soul stage, while the strongest was at the fairy realm. Furthermore, there were not just one or two fairy realm experts, but 4. Seeing this valiant group of assassins, the Duan family head's expression changed slightly. He was worried that his father's safety in the carriage would be threatened, so he immediately shouted to the people accompanying him, "Send them into the Meng mansion first." When the people saw his gaze fall on the carriage where the old city governor was, they understood and protected the carriage. They escorted the people and the carriage into the Meng mansion, and then closed the gate of the Meng mansion. Facing dozens of powerhouses, including 4 fairy realm masters, was the Meng, and he didn't dare to ask the Meng family's men to come out to help. He couldn't let people to protect Fangzhou's people. Of the mansion is Meng's people, Meng of the family, forced from the Meng mansion. To protect the Meng the people in the mansion of them. Of people his peoples to protect Meng. Among them. After all, his relationship with the Meng family was not that deep, and there was no relationship of mutual benefit that he had to protect him. If the situation was too difficult to control, he still wanted to leave and not get involved in this mess. The black-robed men did not care about City Governor Duan's order to send the other carriage into the Meng mansion. Their target was the red-robed youth sitting in the carriage, Fingzhou. Their mission was to take his life. Chapter 1575. Hearing this, Mayor Duan and family head Meng looked at each other and their hearts skipped a beat. These people were all dressed in black, so it was impossible to tell which force they were from. However, their strength, especially the strength of dozens of people, was enough to make them wary. However, if they were to retreat at this time, it would be immoral, especially for Mayor Duan. Fengzhou had just cured his father. If he were to leave him alone and watch him get killed, he would be criticized. After weighing the pros and cons in his heart, Mayor Duan said loudly, "You'd better leave quickly. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite." Ha 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 ha. Good. I'd like to see what ability you have to protect her. One of the leaders raised his head and laughed. He raised his hand and made a gesture. The dozens of black-clothed people around him rushed forward and attacked the carriage. Kill! 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 Fierce shouts containing monstrous killing intent came out from the mouths of the men in black. They no longer concealed their auras. The killing intent and the smell of blood on the men in black were even more terrifying. The surrounding people seemed to be shocked. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly and quickly retreated. In the face of such a situation, Guan Shilin was as calm as ever as he brandished his saber to meet the enemy. His gaze swept past the nascent soul cultivators and landed on the leaders. His eyes moved slightly as he knew that if he wanted to defeat the enemy, he would have to kill the leaders first. Therefore, when he saw those people rushing forward, he aimed his saber at one of the fairy realm cultivators. As for his sister, he believed that these people could not hurt her. Whoosh! Whoosh! His figure moved and the aura of his saber rang out sharply. Guan Shilin rushed into the midst of the black-clothed people alone and slashed with his saber. Every strike of his saber brought about a strong and fierce airflow. Clang! Crack! The sound of saber and sword colliding rang out. The swords in the black-clothed people's hands broke after a cracking sound. Having lost their weapons, it was even more difficult for them to resist Guan Shilin, who was as fierce as a tiger and had explosive combat strength. One by one, the corpses fell to the ground. Thick blood permeated the air, and the visible broken limbs made people tremble in fear. Once again, they were shocked by Guan Shilin's fighting strength. The morale of Mayor Duan and the Meng family's patriarch was greatly boosted when they saw this. With the addition of some people from their families, the situation quickly turned around. At this moment, Fengzhou, who was in the carriage, saw that two of the four fairy realm powerhouses were about to attack Guan Shilin from behind. She turned her palm, and two silver needles with spiritual power shot out from her hand. Swoosh! The two fairy realm experts, who were about to launch a sneak attack, heard the faint noise behind them, and when they turned around to take a look, they waved their sleeves and blocked the two silver needles. At the same time, their sinister gazes swept past the crowd and glared at the red-clothed youth in the carriage. This time, the two of them tacitly attacked at the same time. They no longer paid attention to the bystanders and directly attacked the red-clothed youth. A palm strike struck out and split the carriage in half. Bang! Boom! The carriage fell to the ground. When Mayor Duan and the Meng family's patriarch heard the noise, their hearts tightened. When they turned around, they saw the two fairy realm powerhouses standing in front of the broken pieces of the carriage. Fengzhou, who had been sitting in the carriage, was nowhere to be found. Chapter 1576. Are you looking for me? Are you here? When the voice reached their ears, three of them quickly turned around. However, when they saw that Fengzhou was actually standing behind them, and her hand was gripping the throat of one of the fairy realm experts, she twisted the hand that was gripping the throat of the fairy realm expert when she saw them turn around. Crack! With a cracking sound, the eyes of the fairy realm expert, who had been gripped by the throat and could not make a sound, widened in horror, and his body fell straight to the ground. In his dantian, a sharp dagger had pierced through his back, ending his last chance of survival. Until his death, the fairy realm expert did not make a single sound, and he did not even have the chance to resist. Seeing this scene, the hearts of the three people were overwhelmed with shock. It was as if a sudden clap of thunder had risen from the ground, causing their minds to be greatly shaken. However, before they could recover from their shock, they felt a murderous aura assaulting their faces. A bone-chilling aura of death enveloped them. It was only when the pain spread throughout their bodies that they instinctively reacted. However, at this time, blood had already seeped out of their necks. As they touched the blood on their necks, the three of them did not doubt that if they had retreated a little later, their throats would have been slit. "Didn't you want to find me? I'm right here." Fingzhou twisted the dagger in her hand, and her clear eyes narrowed as she stared at them. "You'd better escape before I kill you. Otherwise, if you fall into my hands, I have plenty of ways to make you suffer a fate worse than death." As soon as she finished speaking, she took advantage of the fact that they were still in a daze, and her red figure once again rushed toward them. It was also at this time that the three people, who had come back to their senses, gritted their teeth and shouted sternly, "Kill her!" The pressure of the fairy realm experts instantly filled the air, and the airflow that was released from their bodies formed a whirlpool that surrounded Fingzhou. The airflow surged and swept up the sand and stones on the ground, isolating her from the rest of the people. The three fairy realm experts entered the whirlpool together to kill Fingzhou. The murderous aura that covered the sky spread out from the whirlpool, and the people outside could not see what was happening inside. They could only hear the sound of swords clashing against each other from time to time. After a few screams, two of the fairy realm experts were ejected from the whirlpool and fell heavily to the ground. At this time, the airflow of the whirlpool dissipated, and the last fairy realm expert fell from the sky, clutching his wound, and retreated. Fingzhou, too, had a few wounds on her body, but blood stained her clothes, and no one could tell. At this time, Guan Shilin, who had dealt with most of the nascent soul cultivators, strode over to Fingzhou's side. When he saw that she had a few wounds on her body, his gaze turned cold, and a murderous aura burst out from his body. He waved his large blade and slashed at the two fairy realm experts who had fallen to the ground and had yet to stand up. With a wave of his saber filled with bloodthirsty killing intent, he ruthlessly cut the two men into two halves. Two mournful screams filled with unwillingness rang out, accompanied by the gasps of the surrounding people in the air. Fresh blood stained the ground, and the bloodthirsty killing caused everyone to tremble in fear. They all retreated a few steps, not daring to move forward. When he saw this scene, the only surviving fairy realm expert gritted his teeth and shouted, "Let's go." Even if he was unwilling, he could not stay any longer. Otherwise, he would be completely annihilated. Chapter 1577. Seeing that they had retreated, Guan Shilin wanted to get rid of them, but Fingzhou stopped him. "Brother, don't chase after them." She looked deeply at the black-robed men who had fled with injuries. There were only a dozen of them left, and they had suffered heavy losses this time. They probably wouldn't cause trouble for her in the near future. However, who had sent these assassins? Had she offended anyone here? As soon as she thought of this, a figure appeared in her mind, but she wasn't sure. "Young Master Feng, you're injured. Are you all right?" Mayor Duan stepped forward and asked. Although he didn't know how Fingzhou had fought with the Fairy Realm Masters alone, it was obvious that Fingzhou had the upper hand. He was shocked and astonished. He had thought that she was only good at medicine, but he didn't expect her to be so powerful. Moreover, she was a master at the peak of the nascent soul realm. She hadn't reached the fairy realm, but she could fight with those at the initial stage of the fairy realm. Her fighting power was undoubtedly terrifying. "I'm fine." She glanced at the wounds on her body. "It's just a small injury." She looked at Mayor Duan and the Meng family head and said apologetically, "I'm sorry to have troubled you." "Young Master Feng, you're too kind." "We didn't help much," the two hurriedly said. "Let's go back first." "Bandage your wounds," Guan Shilin said from the side. He then said to Mayor Duan, "Mayor, I'll take her back to the mansion first." Okay. I'll send someone to escort you. As soon as the mayor said this, Guan Shilin waved his hand to stop him. There's no need. I'll protect her. With that, he left with Fengzhou. The mayor and the Meng family head watched as he carried the blood-dripping broadsword and escorted Fengzhou away. They couldn't help but look at the corpses of the two fairy realm masters, who had been cut in half at the waist. Looking at the bloody scene, the two of them swallowed their saliva at the same time. That's right, with him protecting her and Fengzhou's abnormally strong fighting strength, why would they need to protect her? After Fengzhou and Guan Shilin left, the head of the Duan family sent his father back to his residence after leaving some people to deal with the corpse. As for the two sacred experts who had previously caused trouble for Fengzhou, they had long since hidden themselves, not daring to show their faces. As for the other alchemists and pharmacists, there was even less of a need to talk about them. After the assassination attempt, they only wanted to avoid being investigated. How could they care about anything else? Fortunately, Fengzhou did not argue with them and directly ignored them. When City Lord Duan saw this, he even more so wouldn't purposely mention it. After all, those two were also sacred experts, so no matter what, he had to leave them some face. They watched as everyone left and the corpses on the ground were cleaned up. However, the blood-stained ground and the smell of blood that permeated the air still lingered in their nostrils. It didn't disperse for a long time, and they couldn't calm down either. When they returned to the mayor's residence, Guan Shilin directly sent Fengzhou back to her room and asked her to take off her outer clothes to check her wound. When her red outer clothes were taken off, Guan Shilin's eyes narrowed when he saw the blood-stained scene. Why is there so much blood? Because it was originally a red dress, he thought it was just a small wound. He didn't expect there to be so much blood. Chapter 1578. Lean against the bed and don't move around. I'll apply medicine and bandage your wounds, he said in a low voice as he took out some medicine to stop the bleeding, but she stopped him. Brother, it's okay. You go out first. I'll heal myself, she said softly as she sat cross-legged on the bed. She took out a pill from her space and swallowed it. Hearing this, he frowned. How are you going to heal yourself when you're injured like this? You have to apply medicine immediately. Otherwise, I'll call that little girl over to apply medicine for you. He thought that she was too embarrassed to let him apply medicine for her shoulder, so he got up and walked out, intending to call Duan Ying over. Fengzhou stopped him and shook his head. No, I have a technique that can heal wounds on its own. No medicine can heal faster than this technique. You don't have to busy yourself. Just stand guard outside and don't let anyone disturb me. Guan Shilin didn't quite believe her, but since she said so, he didn't ask any more questions. He just replied, okay. Call me if you need anything. I'll be outside. After giving his instructions, he left the room and stood guard outside. When Duan Ying heard that Fengzhou and the others had returned, she also came to Fengzhou's room. Seeing Guan Shilin standing guard by the door and covered in blood, she couldn't help but turn pale. She asked worriedly, Brother Guan, why are you covered in blood? Where's Fengzhou? Although she drank the medicine that Fengzhou gave her, her voice was still a little hoarse and dry. Even so, her voice was still clear and audible. Guan Shilin glanced at her and said, We ran into some trouble outside and killed a few people. But she's injured and is now healing. You should go back to your room first. Is Fengzhou okay? Is he okay? She asked worriedly. He's fine. Don't worry. Although he said so, he clenched his fists when he thought of her white underwear being dyed red. Who wanted to kill her? They had even sent out so many strong cultivators. It looked like they were determined to kill her. This person dared to make a move on his sister, he would definitely not let him off. Duan Yingying was about to say something when she heard footsteps approaching. At that moment, Guan Shilin also turned around to look, so she did the same. She saw her father and younger sister hurrying over. When she saw them, she bit her lower lip and stood quietly with her head lowered. Brother Guan, is young Master Feng seriously injured? Do you want the doctors in the manor to come over and take a look? City Lord Duan asked. Why are you standing outside when he's injured? Don't you need me to bandage it? Are you a blockhead? You're just standing there like a fool. Duan Linlin scolded Guan Shilin rudely. She was about to push the door open, but before she could take 2 steps, someone grabbed her collar and threw her out. Scram! Guan Shilin shouted coldly with a dark face. His voice was like thunder that hit Duan Linlin's heart, making her feel ashamed and angry. How dare you treat me like this? I'm the daughter of the city lord. You don't want to live anymore. Xiao Lin, back off. Although City Lord Duan felt that Guan Shilin's attitude was not very good, he also knew that he must be in a bad mood after seeing Fengzhou injured. Therefore, he did not dare to blame him and only scolded his daughter. Chapter 1579. Mayor Duan, my brother needs his wounds treated to recuperate. I hope that you won't disturb him for the next 2 days. Guan Shilin said in a low voice, his sharp eyes looking at Mayor Duan. Hearing this, the mayor knew that it wasn't appropriate for him to stay, so he nodded, all right then. We'll leave first. I'll have to trouble Brother Guan to take care of things here. If you need any healers or elixirs, just let me know and I'll immediately send someone to deliver them. As soon as he finished speaking, the mayor glanced at his eldest daughter. He wanted to say something to her, but then remembered that she couldn't hear and couldn't speak, so he could only sigh and give up. Come with me. He glanced at his youngest daughter, then turned and walked out. Although Duan Linlin was unwilling, she didn't dare to disobey her father, so she could only leave with him. Seeing this, Duan Yingying paused for a moment before leaving. She couldn't help much, but she could still prepare some food for them. As for the room, after Guan Shilin left, Fengzhou adjusted the qi in her body, using the endless life force of the green lotus to heal her wounds. Her entire body seemed to be wrapped in a green light, and wherever the green energy flowed, her wounds healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Just as Fengzhou was healing, outside Huanyan City, Xianyuanmo's arrived with Hui Lang and Ning Yi. After receiving Fengzhou's message, Xianyuanmo's, who had finished his business, came to her place. Master, we've arrived at Huanyan City. Hui Lang looked at the words on the city gate and said with a smile, the ghost doctor definitely didn't know that we'd arrived so quickly. She must be very surprised to see us. Ingyi glanced at Hui Lang and said, she's just surprised to see Master. What does it have to do with you? Hui Lang rolled his eyes and said unhappily, can you not pour cold water on me? I haven't seen the ghost doctor for so long, I miss her too. However, just as he finished speaking, he felt a pair of cold eyes staring at him. When he turned around and saw that it was his master, he couldn't help but smile awkwardly. Master, actually, I don't miss the ghost doctor that much. However, just as they were talking and laughing, a black-clothed man appeared out of nowhere. He flashed behind Ying Yi and said something in a low voice. Ying's expression changed slightly, and he waved the man away, then stepped forward to Xianyuanmo's. Master, according to our men, the ghost doctor is treating the city lord's father today. He borrowed the Meng family's Millennium chilling ice bed, so he went to the Meng family. However, when he was about to return to the city lord's mansion after the treatment, he was assassinated by 4 fairy realm experts and dozens of black-clothed men. The ghost doctor, Guan Shilin, and the others killed 3 of the fairy realm experts, while the last one escaped with a dozen men. Our men killed them all. One of them was captured alive, and we found out that the person behind the assassination was the sect master of the Elixir Yang sect. How dare they? A cold and deep voice came out of his mouth. When he heard that she was surrounded by several fairies, he had already walked forward, intending to check on her injuries. Hui Lang and Ying Yi quickly followed after him. They knew that the Danyang sect's master had reached the end of his life. The three of them entered the city and went straight to the city's mansion. When they arrived at the gate, Hui Lang and Ying Yi subdued them without waiting for the guards to report. They opened the gate and let their master in. Chapter 1580. The city lord and his youngest daughter had just come out from Fengzhou's side. They were talking as they walked, and when they reached the front, they heard the guards shouting. Someone had trespassed on the city lord's estate. Vigilantly, he looked towards the direction of the voice. When he saw that the man in the lead was dressed in a black robe with dark patterns, he looked domineering and luxurious. At first glance, he could tell that he was an ordinary person. Moreover, he only brought 2 people with him. They shouldn't be assassins. Seeing that the guards in the mansion and the man's guards were about to make a move, he immediately shouted. Stop! When the city lord's guards saw that the city lord had arrived, they took a step back and respectfully bowed before standing to the side, staring at the 3 people warily. Xianyuan Mose glanced at the city lord and asked, "Where's Fengzhou?" Hearing this, the city lord was startled and asked, "May I know who you are?" "Where's Fengzhou?" Xianyuan Mose furrowed his brows, and a displeased look appeared on his face. His entire aura became even more dignified, noble, and inviolable as his expression darkened. The change in his aura and the envelopment of his aura made the guards in the city lord's estate uneasy, and they looked at the city lord from time to time. However, at this moment, a gentle and shy voice suddenly sounded, breaking the oppressive atmosphere. "Sir, I know where he is. Please come with me." Duan Linlin's heart thumped wildly. Her eyes were filled with this domineering and dignified man. Even if she did not know who he was, his aura and temperament were enough to let her know that this person was definitely not ordinary. Xiao Lin. The city lord frowned and looked at her disapprovingly. How could she bring him to see Fengzhou without knowing whether he was a friend or a foe? If something happened, she was afraid. "Sir, this way please." She ignored her father's words, and her actions were graceful, completely displaying the bearing of the city lord's daughter. Xianyuan Mose strode forward, Hui Lang and Ying Yi following behind him. Seeing this, the city lord could only follow. When they arrived at the courtyard, City Lord Duan and his daughter were blocked outside. In front of the room, Guan Shilin saw Xianyuan Mose and the others walk in. When he saw him, he was surprised. "It's you. Why are you here?" Seeing Guan Shilin guarding the door, Xianyuan Mose's expression softened, and he said in a low voice, "How is she?" "She's injured in several places and lost a lot of blood." As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Xianyuan Mose was about to enter the room. Xianyuan Shilin, wait. Guan Shilin Mose's eyes, Guan Shilin's eyes. Little Nine is recuperating. He told me not to disturb him. That's why he asked me to stay here. You can't go in now. Wait a little longer. Guan Shilin said as he gestured for him to sit down at a table. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose only paused for a moment, then sat down at the table and said, "My men said that the Danyang sect leader hired assassins. Those who escaped were taken care of by Yen Dian. Danyang sect leader. That old man." Guan Shilin's face darkened, and a murderous aura emanated from his body. Damn it. Xiao Jiu didn't even bother with them, but that old man dared to send assassins to assassinate her. Do you know what happened to her mother a while ago? Xianyuan Mose looked at him and asked. Chapter 1581. Xianyuan Mose did not say anything and only listened quietly. He already knew about this. It was precisely because he knew that she was going to Heaven Mountain that he quickly rushed over to accompany her. The two of them sat at the stone table outside the room and waited for Fingzhou to come out. Duan Linlin, who had been outside the courtyard and was unwilling to leave, stared at the courtyard with infatuation. "Father, who do you think that man in black robes is?" It was the first time she had seen such a domineering man. His entire body was filled with endless charm. She really did not know where he came from. Hearing this, City Lord Duan frowned. "Shaolin, put away those thoughts that you shouldn't have. That kind of person is not someone you should provoke." "Father, am I that ugly? I'm the #1 beauty in the city." Speaking of this, she raised her chin proudly and complacently. She was born into a good family and had outstanding beauty. Her cultivation was also not bad among her peers. Furthermore, her father was the city lord of Heaven Mountain City. In terms of birth and personal strength, she felt that the average person was not worthy of her. However, if it was a man like this, City Lord Duan looked at her and felt a faint sense of unease. He was not as innocent as his daughter. From what he had seen of the world, he knew that he should stay as far away from this man as possible. This was because his entire body was filled with an intimidating pressure and the domineering aura of a king. Such a person was definitely not someone they could provoke. In order to prevent his daughter from causing irreparable trouble and implicating the family, he raised his hand and directly knocked her out. "Men, send the young miss back to the courtyard. Without my orders, don't let her out." Two shadow guards rushed out and respectfully replied, "Yes, sir." Then, they took him away. Not long after, City Lord Duan also turned and left. However, he ordered the steward to send some supplements and other things. It was not until evening when the sky gradually darkened that Fingzhou slowly exhaled and opened her eyes. Using the green lotus in her body to heal her injuries, whether internal or external, they had all recovered very quickly. This made her even more curious. With such a treasure, why did that old man give this green lotus to her? Such an item was something that people would fight over. Seeing that her wounds had healed and the energy she had lost had been restored, she stood up, put on her coat, and went outside to open the door. "Brother, help me get someone to send some hot water over, Before she could finish speaking, she saw Xianyuan Mo standing outside. When she saw him, she smiled and walked up to him. "Why are you here? When did you arrive?" Xianyuan Mo's eyes darkened, especially when he smelled the strong smell of blood coming from her body. He frowned and asked, "How are your injuries?" "I'm fine now," she said with a smile. Then, she saw her brother stand up from the table with a smile. "You two have a good chat. I'll get the people outside to prepare the water." With that, he walked out, leaving the two of them alone. Xianyuan Mose brought her back to the room and went to take off her coat. When he took off her coat and saw the blood stains on her white undergarment, a trace of hostility flashed across his eyes. Daring to let his woman bleed so much. This time, it was useless to protect the Danyang sect master. He must take his life. Chapter 1582. I've recovered. Fingzhou smiled. "Didn't I tell you before? I have the chaotic green lotus in my body. It has the miraculous effect of regenerating muscles and promoting blood circulation. Naturally, healing is a piece of cake." Hearing this, Xianyuan Mo's expression improved. "It's good that you're fine." Not long after, someone came in with hot water. Xianyuan Mo said, "Go take a hot bath. I'll wait for you outside." "Okay." Fengzhou replied. After he left, he closed the door and took a bath to wash away the smell of blood. Outside, seeing their master sitting at the stone table, Hui Lang and Ying Yi looked at each other. Hui Lang walked up. "Master, is the ghost doctor all right?" He replied and took a sip of the tea. "It's good that you're all right, it's good that you're all right." Grey Wolf let out a sigh of relief. If the ghost doctor was seriously injured, their master's face would be dark and they would be on tenterhooks. Duan Yingying, who was busy in the kitchen, came to Fengzhou's room in the courtyard, but before she could get close, she was stopped by Ying Yi. At this time, Guan Shilin walked over and said, "She's called Duan Yingying. She's Mayor Duan's eldest daughter. She's a twin sister with the little one from before." As he spoke, he paused and looked at Duan Yingying, who had her head lowered. He smiled and said, "I don't know how this little girl caught Xiaojiu's eye. She's been cooking our meals for the past 2 days. She's pretty good at it." Hearing this, Ying Yi didn't stop Guan Shilin and let him bring her in. When they arrived at the stone table and saw the 2 dishes on it, Guan Shilin said to Hui Lang, "Go and help her bring some food. See if it's enough. If it's not enough, let the people outside send more in." "No problem." Hui Lang replied and patted Duan Yingying's shoulder. "Little girl, let's go." Unexpectedly, this pat scared Duan Yingying so much that her face turned pale and she retreated in panic. "This girl is very timid. Don't scare her." Guan Shilin continued, "She used to be deaf and mute, but Xiaojiu cured her, but she hasn't fully recovered yet." Hui Lang was surprised and then nodded. "Okay, I got it." The 2 of them then went to the kitchen. Duan Yingying was a little afraid of them, so she didn't walk too close to Hui Lang. She just followed 3 steps behind him. When Hui Lang came to the kitchen and saw the dozen or so dishes, he looked around the kitchen in surprise. Seeing that there was no one else, he asked, "Did you make all these by yourself?" Duan Yingying glanced at him and then nodded. She whispered, "I knew there would be guests, so I made more." She didn't go to the front, but she knew that Fengzhou's people had come, so she went back to the kitchen to make more. "I couldn't tell," Hui Lang said with a smile. He picked up his chopsticks and secretly tasted the food, nodding from time to time. It tastes really good." Hearing this, Duan Yingying smiled happily. She liked to cook, so she was happy to see other people like to eat the food she made. The 2 of them carried the dishes to the front and found that one table couldn't fit all of them, so they moved another table and put it together. When the dozen or so dishes were placed on the table, Fengzhou happened to come out of the room. Chapter 1583. Duan Yingying sat awkwardly because there were a few strangers around. She didn't even dare to raise her head. Fengzhou, who was sitting next to her, comforted her and pulled her aside to talk. Only then did the atmosphere gradually ease. Hui Lang and Ying Yi also sat down under Fengzhou's instructions. However, they only dared to sit at the end of the table and didn't dare to sit too close to their master. In other words, the 2 of them sat at the lower end of the table. Everyone drank wine and chatted, and the meal was very relaxing and pleasant. Outside, Mayor Duan, who didn't know that there was such a lively atmosphere inside, was still wondering how serious Fengzhou's injury was. Would he be able to receive those people inside? However, because he had been told not to disturb them, he didn't send anyone in. After the meal, Hui Lang went outside to call someone in to clean up the table. The others walked together in the garden. Even Duan Yingying quietly followed behind them. "Xiaojiu, since they're here, let them accompany you to Tianshan. I'll leave first tomorrow. There are still some things I have to deal with," Guan Shilin told Fengzhou his plan. "You're not going to Tianshan with us?" She was a little surprised. They had already agreed to it. Why was he leaving now that Xianyuan Mose was here? She didn't hear him say that he had something to do before. He nodded and said, "Yes, I'm not going. I plan to deal with some things first. When the time comes, I'll go to Ling Shuang and the others to see foster mother." "All right then. Take care of yourself outside. Don't worry about me. I'm a man who has experienced many things. I don't care about ordinary dangers." Guan Shilin laughed heartily. He looked at Xianyuanmos and said, "I'll have to trouble you to take care of my sister." Xianyuanmos glanced at him and nodded. "Then let's leave tomorrow," Fengzhou said to Xianyuanmos. When they arrived at the garden in the courtyard, she stopped and looked at a stalk of spiritual medicine. "That's it. I'll go and pick it first. We'll leave at dawn tomorrow. This way, we won't alert anyone." She walked inside and shouted to Duan Yingying behind her, "Yingying, lend me your little shovel." Hearing Fengzhou's words, Duan Yingying took out a small shovel from her space and handed it to Fengzhou, then stood aside and watched. She knew that she had come here for this stalk of spiritual medicine, saying that it was her reward for curing her grandfather. Watching her dig out the spiritual herb and transplant it into her space, Mo Tiange was a little startled. "Won't the spiritual herb die if you do this?" Normally, space could only store inanimate objects, and spiritual herbs were no exception. Even if she moved the soil inside, she was afraid that it wouldn't survive. "It won't." Feng Jiu smiled and handed the small iron shovel back to her. "We're leaving tomorrow, so we won't say goodbye to your father. If he asks about it, you can tell him that I was the one who dug out the elixir." "Okay." Duan Yingying nodded. She was a little reluctant to part with her. "Will you come again in the future?" Fengzhou smiled and shook her head. "I don't think so. The place I'm going to is not here. Didn't I give you 2 books? Remember to practice hard. It'll be good for you to learn." Chapter 1584. In the middle of the night, Hui Lang went out with Lao Bai to prepare and didn't return. Fengzhou and the others went to bed early. The next morning, Duan Yingying, who knew that they were leaving, made porridge and a few dishes for them to eat. When she sent them off, she gave Fengzhou a bag of dried food. "You can eat this on the road. It can be stored for a few days. I also made some jerky for you." Her voice had completely recovered and was no longer hoarse, but pleasant to the ear. "Yingying, I really like you." "Thank you." Fengzhou took the bag and hugged her, smiling as he thanked her. Hearing this, she lowered her head in embarrassment and nodded. "You must take good care of yourself. If there is a chance in the future, I really hope to see you again." "Okay, if I pass by here in the future, I will definitely come and see you. But you have to remember my words. Even if it's your family, you have to be careful. Your sister is not a good person. You have to be careful and learn more self-defense skills," she said worriedly. "And, don't worry, I will." "Okay, then we will be leaving," Fengzhou said and nodded towards Xianyuanmos and the others. They gathered their energy and directly rushed towards me from the courtyard. In just a few breaths, they disappeared into the morning sky. At noon, City Lord Duan was pleasantly surprised that his father had woken up. Seeing that there was no movement in the courtyard, he wanted to go take a look. Who knew that when he arrived, he would only see his eldest daughter trimming the flowers and plants. Moreover, the exquisite rainbow flower was already gone. Shocked, he hurriedly asked, "Where is the spirit herb here?" Duan Yingying looked at him and then looked at the place he was pointing at. Thinking for a moment, she lowered her head and took out a pen and paper from the universe bag at her waist and wrote, "That spirit herb was dug up by Fengzhou. They left before the sun rose." Seeing the words, City Lord Duan was furious. "They wanted to leave, why didn't you tell me?" Last night, the servants and the residents reported that one of them had left with Fengzhou's horse. At that time, he didn't think too much about it. Now that he saw it, he realized that they had long planned this. Duan Yingying lowered her head, her face blank, as if she didn't know what he was talking about. Seeing this, City Lord Duan became more and more annoyed. He immediately snatched her pen and paper and asked, "Then did he say anything before he left?" Fengzhou said that Grandpa's body will be fine after some rest. He didn't say anything else. She wrote on the paper and then stood there quietly without looking up. Looking at this daughter of his, he couldn't help but feel disgusted. She was born deaf and mute. If word got out, he would feel embarrassed. Even if Fengzhou and the others stayed in this courtyard, she would not help to keep an eye on them. If there was any news, she would inform him. What was the use of such a good-for-nothing? Now that Fengzhou and the others had left, and his eldest son had not returned yet, it was better to take advantage of this time to marry her off. He thought to himself. Staring at his eldest daughter, who had her head lowered, he turned around and walked out. After her father left, Duan Yingying finally raised her head. She calmly looked at the departing figure. Although her expression was normal, her heart felt terrible. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.